Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Roseville City Council's May 5th of 2021 City Council meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk to please read the roll.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt.
Here.
Councilmember Albert.
Here.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Here, thank you. And I noticed that we have Scott Huber in the audience this evening. He serves as a school board member for the Roseville Joint Union High School District, and I'd like to ask Scott, and I believe he's an Eagle Scout too, right? If he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I have a son who is an Eagle Scout. I am a lifer for life. So close. If you'd all please join me in saluting our flag to our wonderful country. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to ask our clerk if she would read the procedures for addressing the City Council.
Good evening, everyone. As a response to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, the meeting of the Roseville City Council will allow members of the public to participate and address the City Council during the meeting. Public comment may be taken by a limited number of participants attending the meeting, and public comment may also be submitted by telephone by calling 916-774-5353. If you do call this evening, you will be placed on hold until the attendant can answer. The broadcast is delayed by up to 30 seconds when watching at home. When your call is transferred to the City Council, you will have 5 minutes in which to address items that are on the agenda and 3 minutes to speak to items under public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I will monitor your time and let you know when your time has expired. When calling, please do not use the speakerphone the speakerphone option, as it may create difficulty for the City Council. And make sure the volume is turned down on your television when you do address the City Council, because there's an echo if you have your TV on and you're trying to speak. So thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you. We'll move into item 5.1. It's a proclamation for Public Service Recognition Week, and I'd like to ask our city manager to please meet me at the podium. Okay, so as you know, this is Public Service Recognition Week from May 2nd to May 8th, and in honor of millions of public employees at the federal, state, and county and city levels. Whereas Americans are served every day by public servants at the federal, state, and county and city levels, and these unsung heroes do the work that keep our nation functioning, and their tireless efforts are especially critical today during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas public employees take oaths to perform their jobs, and many public servants, including police officers, firefighters, military personnel, border patrol officers, embassy employees, and healthcare professionals, risk their lives each and every day in service to the people of the United States and around the world. Whereas public servants include utility workers, inspectors, engineers, teachers, scientists, social workers, safety inspectors, dispatchers, laborers, parks, recreation, library workers. These all sound familiar, right? It takes a lot to run a city. Computer technicians and countless other occupations day in and day out. They provide the service demanded by American people of their government with efficiency and integrity. Without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. So, on behalf of the City of Roseville, I proclaim May 2nd, the week of May 2nd through the 8th, is Public Service Recognition Week, and encourage all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contribution of government employees at all levels.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just say a couple words. I'm not used to getting a proclamation award. We're used to awarding them. So thank you, Mayor and Council, on behalf of over 1,200 staff and employees for the City of Roseville. We thank you for this recognition. As you know, we recently took place in a national city survey with partnership with International County Management Association, and we received those results last week at our Council Goals workshop. Through the resident-based survey, we learned that our city team in the areas of customer service and Roseville as the best place to work received some of the highest ratings from hundreds of cities and benchmarks across the United States. And I believe the value that this council and our community places on community service is really the reason we receive those high marks and we see such high service levels from our staff. We do have a video that we want to share, and as you'll see from that video, Roseville really truly is a great place to work and a great city to live in. We take pride, we take enjoyment in serving this community. So I really do thank you for this recognition, and I have to thank our staff for their hard and tireless effort and work, because without them, we wouldn't have this recognition and wouldn't be able to provide the services we do. So thank you and thank them, and I think we have a video to share.
For the city of Roseville because I really love the city of Roseville. I moved here specifically for the community aspect, the people, the atmosphere, all the amenities that we have to offer. I could not wait to be able to give back any way that I could.
We have plenty of opportunity to move around in the city, and it's a great appreciation as you grow in a career with multiple opportunities.
I work for the city of Roseville because it gives me a unique opportunity to take the profession that I love, that I've chosen to do, and to combine that with public service. I've always had a strong interest on public service, and it gives me the ability to unite those two things.
What I appreciate most about working for the city is the organizational culture. You know, it's one that is supportive, it's accepting, it's exciting, there's room for growth and advancement. And out of all the places that I've worked, I've never felt such a sense of community and partnership.
I appreciate a lot of things for working for this city. Number one, the support and the opportunity this city has given me throughout the course of my career. I have a long career to go with the city, and I know that there's no glass ceiling.
The city of Roseville is like a family for me. I feel like everybody knows each other and everybody can get along, and we create a great community just with the workers that we work here.
Being a public servant is something that I'm very passionate about. I like to make myself available and go the extra mile for our customers and also to my coworkers.
It's nice over the years that I've been here now, almost 2 decades, that I have those relationships built with the different coworkers in the different departments that I can call somebody up and be able to, solve a problem or get something done because of relationships I've been able to build.
I'm learning from great managers, and we are hiring great staff that are also teaching me things, and I am able to pass on some of that knowledge to them. And so I would just say I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't working for the city of Roseville.
Done.
It was nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you. Okay, the next presentation we have is item 5.2, Placer County Whole Person Care Program. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. I'm Laura Mattioli, your Economic Development Director. Tonight, I'm bringing forward a presentation that you requested in fall of 2020 regarding the Placer County Whole Person Care Program. This time, I'd like to introduce the speakers and the format of the presentation tonight. So the presentation will be given by Placer County and the Gathering Inn. Placer County will provide a presentation on the Whole Person Care Program, and the presentation will be given by Dr. Oldham, who is Placer County Health and Human Services Director, and Mr. Jeff Smith, who is the Program Manager. Following his presentation, we're going to lead right into the Gathering Inn's presentation by Keith Diedrich. He is the President and CEO of the Gathering Inn, and he will speak with regards to the permanent supportive housing that they operate in the city of Roseville. Following both presentations, we'll open up for council questions, and then you may open up for public comment. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Oldham. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And
thanks to the council for this invitation to speak tonight, to come back to talk about our whole person care program and to maybe not talk about COVID. So thanks for a little bit of a break from COVID. The first slide, you can, if you can pull up the slide deck, I hope you can see those. Just the title for our presentation tonight is from Hopeless to Home, which is actually borrowed from our whole person care success stories. We have something online, so if you can just, if you want to Google Placer whole person care, it'll bring up our program website. Included in that is a number of success stories. So proud here, you'll see a picture of Ellen. So it's a whole person care member who fell on some tough times and ended up in the shelter at the Gathering Inn a few years back. Actually developed stage 3 cancer, and a great success story. You can read more about Ellen online if you'd like, along with a lot of our other members who whole person care has helped towards their recovery. So I'm joined tonight with Jeff Smith, who's our program manager of our whole person care. And actually, Jeff came to us several years back from Monterey County and in Fresno County before that. So has a long history in kind of service and behavioral health. So happy to have Jeff with us tonight. If you move on to the next slide, please. So this is just an overview slide. When I was back with you a few months ago, gave a little bit of an introduction to Placer County Health and Human Services. And so as a reminder, kind of how we're set up, and to put whole person care in the context of our department a little bit. So again, we're your health department. We're the health department for all of Placer County, including the cities. And our mission, basically building a healthy Placer together. And so whole person care and definitely the work that we're doing around homelessness is very much aligned with that mission. We're set up, as a reminder, we have 6 different divisions, which you see listed here on the slide, and then over 100 different programs. So whole person care is one of those many programs. It's actually located in our public health operating division. And the role of the HHS department is really in mobilizing a whole department response to priority issues and trying to integrate those programs and divisions in the work as much as possible. And so certainly homelessness is one of those issues, like COVID, that crosses over lots of, many different programs and divisions and needs a whole department response. So part of the reason we're involved in addressing the homelessness issue and whole person care in particular. Next slide, please. So it's also important in setting the context, we're talking about whole person care, to recognize that whole person care and Placer County HHS, we're not alone in working on homelessness. And so here there's a list of just some of the entities, the groups who are working on homelessness in our community. Including them, obviously, the City of Roseville, the Housing Authority, many police departments, including Roseville PD, and the Gathering Inn, who's joined with us, is going to be presenting here after we do. And the next slide, please. I think the other important context to set is really looking at the numbers and the data around homelessness. And so we're very engaged in homelessness. It's a significant problem throughout the county, but definitely in certain areas we have pockets where it's even a more significant problem. But as a county and as a continuum of care, which our continuum of care also includes Nevada County, so Roseville, Rockland, Placer, Nevada County's continuum of care. You'll see here, based on the point in time count that's done every year, our rate of homelessness per 100 or per 10,000 people is really one of the lowest in the state, and certainly is the lowest in this region. So although we have significant problems, it's important to keep that in context. And I'll say, and we'll talk more about maybe why that is. Some of that is just the investment that we as a community have made to address homelessness. And also, and we talk about health, why is Placer healthier than many other counties? Things are social determinants of health, things like education, strong education system, strong economy, those types of things that really help to drive better health outcomes, including having lower rates of homelessness. But as you'll see, the 2020 point in time count, we saw an uptick in homelessness. Still waiting on the results of the 2021 count, which is going to be tough because it was done in the middle of a pandemic. But we are seeing kind of an uptick nationally in homelessness. Kind of that's the trend, and certainly here in California, especially again, and many other communities are really being impacted. And so the wave is towards seeing a huge increase in homelessness, and so we certainly want to remain engaged on this issue. Next slide, please. And the last sort of context setting slide before we talk specifically about whole person care is just to talk about all the different things. One, you see this is a timeline going back to the 1970s. Obviously, homelessness was a thing long before the 1970s, but a lot of the programs addressing homelessness started around then, including the housing choice vouchers. You'll see permanent supportive housing, which we're going to talk quite a bit more about tonight. The idea and the research around permanent supportive housing is 20 plus years old. You'll see some other key milestones: the Mental Health Services Act in 2004, under a proposition led by Mayor Steinberg, really helped to fund some additional services for mental health. But along with that, the idea that housing, especially for people with serious mental illness, is an important component in recovery for many people with serious mental illness experiencing homelessness. You'll see here some other key events, and there's a lot packed into 2015-16. So the Marbut homelessness study, and we'll talk more about maybe taking another look, having an outside consultant. So this is Robert Marbut, who went on to become the executive director for the National Homelessness Agency at the federal level. So before he had that fame, Dr. Marbut came to Placer and did a study on homelessness. Also in that year is when our first permanent emergency shelter, I know we've had a pneumatic shelter run by the Gathering Inn for many years, and along with some other specific other shelters, but one of the biggest permanent homeless shelter in Mid-Placer opened in that year, along with, so in 2016, No Place Like Home, which was a lot of additional funding for permanent supportive housing, the Housing First requirement at the federal level. And then actually also in 2016, we couldn't fit it all in that year. The whole person care pilot started here in Placer. And project, then here just in 2020, Project Room Key and Project Home Key coming out of a lot of the COVID dollars to help fund some additional housing supports for people experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So talking specifically about whole person care, just an overview of sort of why we did this. So I mentioned it was a pilot that we actually started the application back in 2015, but really hit the ground running on whole person care in 2016. It's under the state Medicaid programs. The Department of Health Care Services had a waiver process to the federal Medicaid program to kind of waive the usual rules for Medicaid or Medi-Cal here in California to allow some innovation. And the idea is there's a recognition that the healthcare dollar that we spend historically was spent on fee-for-service care. So kind of, sometimes that didn't always lead to the best outcomes, particularly for certain types of people, including people experiencing homelessness, who often hit lots of different really expensive levels of care, both within the healthcare delivery sector, but also criminal justice, social services, et cetera. And so the idea is let's try to do something different. And so whole person care was an attempt by the state to give local governments, counties, the flexibility to try different things, to measure those things, and actually to pay for performance as opposed to just paying for input. So actually to pay for outcomes and to pay for care, not just for individual patients, but on a population. And so the way I was lucky enough to be involved in helping to build the application for our program, was arranged in different bundles. And so some of the other healthcare world is used to bundled payment. But one of our first forays here in the county and having bundled payment, so we arranged whole person care around some 4 core bundles: an engagement bundle, so a bundle of services to help get people experiencing homelessness engaged in services, a care coordination bundle, a housing bundle to help not to pay for housing. We'll talk more about how we did that later, but the housing services to help support people in housing, and then a medical respite bundle to have services for people, largely folks coming out of the hospital, so that they don't have to require another hospitalization. Next slide, please. So I mentioned part of whole person care, we're paid in bundles, but also based on performance. And along with the pay for performance, we have certain metrics that we're held accountable to and actually get incentive payments for meeting those metrics. And we're proud to report under Jeff's leadership and a fabulous team that he has, that so far we've hit all the metrics and so gotten significant amounts of additional incentive payments for achieving those metrics, which you'll see listed here. Next slide, please. So with that, we've had generated some savings from operating efficiently in the bundles, but also for the pay for performance metrics, achievement in those on those metrics. In addition, we've been recognized for the whole person care program, which is serving about 500 people, and actually the idea of serving people experiencing chronic homelessness and some of the highest need folks to the hospitals really appreciated. These are the folks who often were coming back to the emergency departments over and over again. So Sutter Health gave a significant investment along with intergovernmental transfers from our Medi-Cal managed care plans to invest that we've invested in long-term housing and support. So you'll see here some data on those investments. Just year over year from 2019 to 2020, the permanent supportive housing increases, including for people with serious mental illness. So that number, 181 total units in 2021, so that we've nearly doubled that just over the last few years. So significant investment in permanent supportive housing in Placer over the last few years. But I'll say permanent supportive housing is nothing new for Placer County, and actually a lot of the other agencies, our partner organizations that we talked about before. We've been doing that for decades. I would say long before Jeff and I came to Placer County. There's been work on permanent supportive housing, and so it's a proven strategy, not just in Placer but nationwide. Thought as a national best practice, the idea of combining housing assistance with voluntary support services to address chronic homelessness. Next slide, please. But I think it's pretty much unanimous that permanent supportive housing is a good idea. But our investments in permanent supportive housing have raised some concerns, and I'll say most of those concerns have been recent. So we've been making these investments for decades, but recently we're hearing more worry about the purchase of homes in residential neighborhoods, including concerns that maybe there might be impacts on public safety and property values. In talking with our law enforcement agencies, both historically and recently, we haven't heard a lot of significant problems associated. So they're not reporting lots of incidents with the residents that are permanent supportive housing homes. I know Keith will talk more about the approaches the Gathering Inn uses. Our other major partner who does permanent supportive housing is AMI Housing. And so they've historically had really good results in managing any of those concerns from neighbors in residential areas. So again, nearly everyone agrees to the need for permanent supportive housing. Yet I'd say there's less agreement on exactly how we deliver those services. And the big question is where, right? Next slide, please. And I'll conclude just by saying I think we have a real opportunity now to continue making progress around the issue of homelessness, and particularly around permanent supportive housing. As I mentioned, there's Project Room Key and now Home Key. Those funds have a set time frame, so there's a little bit of an impetus for us to make some of these big decisions on the how and where for permanent supportive housing, and make those decisions pretty soon. And then the other big impetus, whole person care, is transitioning to a new model, the California Advancing and Innovating Medi-Cal model, or CalAIM, in 2022. So it's a great time to be talking about this. It's like the future. What do we, how do we want to work on homelessness together. I think that from the county, there's a real desire to partner more with the cities. I've been with Placer County off and on, but came back in my role as HHS director back in the fall, and it seems like there's a lot more talk now about partnering with the cities. Part of that may be as a result of COVID. I think we've really partnered together a lot. So really appreciate the City of Roseville in particular and your staff and our partnership. Just in watching the videos, saw lots of familiar faces we're used to partnering with on a regular basis, and we really look forward to continuing those partnerships efforts to address homelessness. With that, I wanted to stop and hand off to Jeff Smith for a little bit, who really, like I said, he came here from Monterey County just to run this program. So was really excited about whole person care, again, as a pilot. So he came knowing pilots, that this pilot had a 5-year shelf life. It was extended for a year, but has had a lot of passion and has done an amazing job of bringing together a very committed group of teammates working on whole person care. So Jeff, what did I miss? What do you want to fill in about whole person care? Thanks.
All right, I'll be brief. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the program manager for Whole Person Care. I'm here mostly tonight to be able to answer any questions that come up after the presentation, as I might know more details about the program. But while I'm here, I want to make sure to recognize and thank our community partners who have been so important in helping Whole Person Care to be successful. Sutter Hospital is an important partner, the Gathering Inn, AMI Housing. City of Roseville is an excellent partner. We couldn't ask for a better city partner. And I also just wanted to be here so that you have a face to the name, so that if you have questions about Whole Person Care or anything going on, you know who I am. You'll be able to contact me and work through anything that comes up. So that's all I have now until questions. So I think Keith will be next.
Yeah, great. And just wanted to recognize that we've been talking a lot about and give time to maybe switch over to Keith's PowerPoint presentation, but we talked a lot about the Gathering Inn tonight. But the leader behind the Gathering Inn, Keith Diederich. So thanks so much, Keith.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Bernasconi, Council. That's about the best introduction I've had in a while. Thank you. Appreciate that. Roseville is a great city. It's got great leadership. It's got a good city manager. It's got great staff. Laura Matoli couldn't be better to work with. I'm reminded of a quilt. It's red. No, it's actually pink. And it's on my bed. It's my wife's. And it's made of fabric. And the fabric is the community of, I'll just say Roseville, right? And in a quilt and fabric, you got stitching. And I look at nonprofits like the stitching in a quilt. We hold the community together, especially for those people that are the least among us or that need a lot of help. And that's what the Gathering Inn does. In fact, I have my program director, Nathan Cox. He's a little intimidating looking, but he's actually a good guy. And we've got 2 residents, and they're sitting in the audience. And I'm not going to ask them to stand up, but they're residents in the Roseville home, and they're here tonight. One of them you will see tonight when I get all done. We have a video, and his name is Brian, and he's a Marine Corps vet. And he was homeless for 18 years, living on the streets. And now he is housed in this Roseville home. What a great testament to the city of Roseville, to the community here in Placer County, that we could provide an opportunity for Brian to turn his life around and to make changes. So I've got, I think it's 13 slides. And I don't want to really go through all 13. We can key up the first one. Can tell you a little bit about permanent supportive housing. Maybe go to the next one. I may say PSH as we're going through it. but I'm referring to permanent supportive housing. So what is it? What is permanent supportive housing? It's an intervention that combines affordable housing with supportive services to address people that have been chronically homeless. Next one. It's costly. It is very costly for communities to have people on the streets. That number, 35,000, actually adjusted to 2021 with some new data that I just saw. It's about 49 grand, 49,000. And the average cost of PSH that we run is about $12,800. So the community is saving a lot of money. And don't forget the human factor. People like Brian that are sitting in here today, they get an opportunity to change their lives. Next slide. A lot of people in Placer County, that's the 2019 count. The 2020 count's over 700. Next slide. There were a bunch of meetings that happened in 2018 or so. How did we address homelessness? There were some meetings in Roseville and Rockland, all over the place. And the bottom line for those meetings is, man, there's a bottleneck. You know, the Gathering Inn, we've got 175 shelter beds. They're low barrier. I mean, you have to be clean and sober to get in. But the bottleneck in the community is housing. I mean, have you checked what the housing prices are lately? Have you checked what the rents are lately? For the folks that we serve, it's hard to get a place. So what do? Well, the county was had a lot of foresight to start this program many, many years ago, and here we are today. And this is one of the homes. We have 3 of them now. Well, we just acquired the Lazarus Project, so we now have 7. And we provide affordable housing for people in the community that need it. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, you already talked about that. Talked about the RFP. We applied for it. We got it. We got half of it. We bought 3 homes. Strategically placed 3 homes. 1 in Lincoln, 1 in Rockland, and 1 in Roseville. Okay, next one. Tenants, who do we not accept? We do not accept sexual offenders. We do not accept arsonists. We do not accept anybody that we don't think can live in a community-based setting. We interview everybody that comes in. We get a referral from whole person care, but we make the decision as the Gathering Inn because we want to be good tenants. We want to be good landlords in the community, good owners. I live in Roseville. I have lived in Roseville since 2007. You know, I love Roseville. I won't do anything to hurt Roseville or any other place. We run good programs. We have program rules. We have expectations. We have staff in the house. Not 24/7 because it's permanent supportive housing, but we have somebody in the house every single day of every home. Next slide. We're not a homeless shelter. This part of what we do. There's a little misnomer out here. Well, you know, Keith, you're running homeless shelters in homes. We're not running homeless shelters in homes. Okay, these are tenants. They pay rent. They have tenant rights just like any other tenant does. And in fact, they probably have more than you and me because they're protected under California fair housing law against discrimination and harassment, and they're protected under federal law under the same thing. Next slide. Typical arguments I hear about PSH. It's going to lower my property value. I'd like to see some data on that because all the data here says that's not true. Next slide. We have local example of that. There's the 4 homes of the Lazarus Project. You can look at the details. We're not affecting negatively property values in Roseville. Next slide. I have to disclose the presence of a PSH home if I'm right by one. I'm legally required to do that. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just like anybody else. If you have a nuisance that rises to the level of that, then you do have to disclose that. But just because it's a PSH home, you do not, as a property owner next to that program, have to disclose that. Okay, next slide. We're good neighbors. We've been in the Roseville community since 2004. Many of you have come and toured our program. You see what we do. We run good outcome-oriented programs. We're proud. I'm so excited, actually, to be up here today. I'm waiting for the public comment. I'm waiting for the public comment to defend, if I have to, the people that are least among us that we're able to support at the Gathering Inn. So with that, can we show the video for Brian?
Actually,
Oh,
Mr. Diedrich,
yes.
I need to apologize. The video is not queued up and won't
it's
be
not.
able to be played tonight.
Okay, that's too bad. Okay.
I know.
Yeah. So real quick, Brian, Marie Corps vet, I think I already mentioned that, 18 years homeless on the streets. I think many of the council actually saw that video. I did forward it to you. He is here tonight. I'm not going to ask him to speak, but he's made a significant transition in his life, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to live in a community that affords him the opportunity to do so. And with that, I will end my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does the council have any questions? Or I will start on my right, maybe with Councilmember Rakucci, and we can work our way down.
No, the only comment I'll say is, Keith, I did see the video of Brian, and I put it on share on my Facebook because I thought it was really good.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it.
Well, thank everybody for their presentation, and there's value in this, so thank you.
Vice Mayor Haldershot?
Yeah, I can understand the concern, but the fact that you have supervision in the whole person care program, regardless of whether it's Roseville, Lincoln, or Rockland, I think of constituent calls I get. Oh, what? They're moving oxygen tanks into this. And we have houses in Roseville for seniors with dementia and Alzheimer's that are cared for, right? We have very little permitting control over that. It gives them a sense of purpose, care, and it actually, I think it's safer for the neighborhood, right? And so, I appreciate, the fact that the Sutter Health Foundation is involved in this. And when this first emerged as a concern, I watched the video. I saw Brian. I saw a woman that was profiled. Thanks for giving them a hand up and not a hand out.
So I have. Whoa! I just hit a button that.
You have another floor here? You're going
so, yeah.
to, or what?
My back is bothering me tonight, so I'm trying to get comfortable in my chair. I've been involved in several community conversations, and I'll make some comments at the end after public comment, because I got to go out and visit the house and talk to neighbors. We walked, Nathan and I went and knocked on a bunch of doors all around there. But I was wondering, can you talked, when you had your slide up, it talked about the residents of the home, they want to be there, and they have to work to meet certain requirements. So it's not just pulling somebody off a street with a shopping cart and here you go, here's a place for you to be. It's somebody that had to meet some requirements and agreed to go through a program. So could you talk a little bit about what some of those requirements are? What is it they're learning? What is it they're doing there, as opposed to what somebody might assume is not happening there?
Sure. That's a really good question, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. So all the referrals are vetted through Whole Person Care, which is Placer County, through Jeff Smith. And once they're referred to us, we have an interview process. And we try to determine in that interview process whether or not they're ready for community-based living. Some people are, some people aren't. So we have a structured interview process that we go through. And once they meet that requirement, then we have program rules that delineate what you can do and what you can't do when you're in the home. And the guests at that point in time, if they want to commit to those rules, they sign off on those, okay? So once they sign off on those, then Nathan takes over, and he actually moves people in. You saw the home. I really appreciate you took the initiative to come out and take a tour of it. And we have staff in the home every single day, about 4 hours a day at staggered times. And we provide them with support services. Maybe somebody needs to go to a doctor's appointment or whatever their needs are. We try to address those in the program. I think he goes out, I don't know if the council knows, he goes out every week or every other week pretty frequently with Roseville PD, problem-oriented policing units, going through the ravines and looking for folks that we can help at the gathering. And so we have a great relationship with the Roseville Police Department. We've had one call at that home since we opened, and I'll tell you what the call was. So I think it was over the Thanksgiving holiday.
It was, absolutely.
One of our residents needed a ride somewhere, so they got a ride, and the person that provided the ride had nowhere to stay that night. So what they did is they parked their car in front of the Roseville home and slept in the car overnight. And one of the community members called, and we addressed it, and we told our resident, you can't do that. And that's the only the only call we've had. Yeah. It's the only call we've had. So we're there. We want to be good neighbors. We hold our folks accountable. And I don't know if that answered your question. If you want a little bit more detail, Nathan's here. He's in the homes almost every day.
That helps because and I remember the day I came, they had just some of the residents didn't know how to use an automatic coffee machine, and so there was a training session on how to use the pods and the coffee machine and stuff. And I thought that was pretty interesting just because they weren't used to it. So. The other question I want to ask is, could you discuss a little bit about the legal requirements? So there was quite a bit I learned during this process, and my word, what a process. If you have less than 6 people in a house, you don't have to have a permit. There were people that felt like the council should have stopped this, and I wasn't even informed until you bought the house. And I believe that was kind of the story for our whole city. Could you just discuss a little bit about the legal aspects of it? And you said there's state protections. I think that would be important for the community to hear that, because for some reason people feel like we should have stopped it, and I don't even think it's anything related to our city at all other than being in the
so
city.
do you go into the minutia of the fair housing laws of California and federal law? And I mean this in no disrespect, but this council has no jurisdiction over it. I could go out as the gathering and purchase 50 more homes in Roseville if I had the money and start permanent supportive housing, because what I think the government, both state and federal, realized is that that's what's needed sometimes to get a home in a community. And I mean that in no disrespect for this council, because you guys have been very on the forefront of homeless services. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really a county and state decision. Now we can talk about was there enough community input, or we put an offer on the home and then I called you and then you came out, and I think it was about 6 weeks before we actually put a resident in there, and we try to meet with community members and so on and so forth. I got to tell you, though, I mean, at the end of the day, if I had to go around and get all the other levels of permissions and stuff, it just drags the process out a lot longer, and I've got people that need housing, so I'll just leave it at that.
One of the things that I learned in this is that I could go buy a house as well as any company, and I can put up to 6 people in without having a permit, and I can have any 6 people I want, and I can rent it to them and not even have to be there. And that was something that was, I think, surprising to a lot of us, is like anybody can do this. After you get 6, you have to have a permit for the use and stuff, but you guys are under 6. So I just think
we're 5 in the Roseville home. Yeah, we're 5 in the Roseville
I think the community members right around there know that now, but that was quite a process for us all to go through and try to understand.
And I think one of, like, when you and Nate went out to all the, the homes and talking with people, we did that prior to moving people in. We tried to, talk to folks and educate folks and stuff like that. Some people are open, some people aren't. Some people just take time. You know, there's a Miranda Lambert song. The title of it just takes all kinds of kinds. There's all kinds of people in the world, you know, and there's some that are open, some that are not, some that need some time, whatever. We're good with that. We want to be good neighbors. If we get a call, there's an issue, we address it right away. We want to be good neighbors.
Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple questions for you. I want to thank you for you being on the front lines of this for many years, and you have a job that many people don't want, and so thank you for doing it well.
I appreciate that.
Can you just talk at a real high level on the funding?
Absolutely.
Just for this particular program.
Absolutely, and I may turn that over to Jeff because the funding actually comes through whole person care, but I can speak to Sutter's contribution, multi-million-dollar contribution, matching money to whole person care to buy. And we have 3 homes at the Gathering Inn, but the RFP that was sent out was for 6 homes. So we got half of it, and then Advocates for Mentally Ill Housing, AMI, got the other half. But Jeff, if you're listening, I would turn over to the machinations of the state funding and where that all comes from.
Just a real high level would suffice.
Sure. The homes we've purchased have primarily been from the Sutter funding and from state funding. We got a $1.3 million one-time grant for whole person care that we used to purchase a couple of homes in addition to the Sutter funding. That's most of the funding that we've had specifically to purchase homes.
Okay, and then what about ongoing operational expenses?
That's through the whole person care program, and it's a federal pass-through to the state, and that's how our program is funded.
Okay. What is the future of this type of housing in Placer County? I mean, I think that's probably what is on everyone's mind.
Sure. I will defer to the grid doctor, Robert Oldham, on that one, since he controls the purse strings.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And as Jeff says, there's lots of different funding streams for permanent supportive housing. And as you pointed out, there are other funders of permanent supportive housing besides, Placer County HHS. And so we happen to get some grants through health plans, through the state, through Sutter Health. But as you said, anybody can actually fund it, and they do. There are other funders and other people who are in the permanent supportive housing funding business. The future of permanent supportive housing, I think we need more of it. And actually, we've been able to generate some savings and kind of have a housing fund. We have not, because of largely the community, I think we're being more transparent. I think there's more attention now on permanent supportive housing, and especially the scattered site model in neighborhoods. And so we're looking at that model, and there are other ways, like we mentioned Project Home Key, opportunities to buy hotels, motels. So there are other things that we're considering, and actually in the whole context of a comprehensive look at our approach to homelessness, so including permanent supportive housing, but also including sheltering and other aspects of our continuum of care. And so I mentioned we're in the process actually working with the city and helping to select a consultant that's going to come in and lead a process to engage with all the major stakeholders, including the county, the cities, faith community, community-based organizations like the Gathering Inn, to talk about, make sure we're all on the same page about what we're doing and get the facts straight about, so everyone understands kind of what the whole problem is with homelessness, what our current continuum of care looks like, have an outside consultant with some subject matter expertise who works in different communities to maybe look at other best practices and assess for gaps in our system and where we want to fill in. And so I think that's sort of, we know that we need more permanent supportive housing, but the where and how we do that, I think we're open to pausing on the scattered site model for a little while until we can have some agreement about if we can, where and how we're going to go forward. But I mentioned the pressure of we have all this funding that actually has time limitations on it, so we can't press the pause button for too long without missing some opportunities.
Okay. I'll pause on my questions. If the council doesn't have any other questions, go ahead.
How long can you stay in the permanent housing?
There's no time limit on the front end because it's permanent supportive housing, so we could have people there for a very long time. Although we could have people there for a shorter time in transition, because our goal would be to get people to actually be in a full community-based setting that wouldn't need the supportive part of it, wouldn't need the staff coming by and making sure people get the places and get the treatment if they have some treatment needs that they have. So
okay, so they can
there's
stay
no
as
time
little
limit.
or as long.
Whereas at our shelter it's 6 months.
Yeah, I was say okay, and then I guess it's my understanding at the permanent housing, as in any neighborhood, a resident could call the police because something was disruptive.
Absolutely.
Any neighbor, not
absolutely.
Something's going on. They're not sure, and they
absolutely.
So it's not just your facility; it's any of the neighbors. They
absolutely.
Concerns.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if that ever happens, we go out and we address it and we try to figure out what's going on. Because again, we want to be good neighbors. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, stand by, because I know before I close up, maybe there might be other questions of the council, but I'll open it up to public comment and I'll take phone calls first. I see we have at least 3, so we can send the first one through. And then I will see if there's anyone in the chambers here who wants to comment on it.
Good evening. If you state your name, you may make your comments now. Hello?
Yes, I'm still here. Yes. Hello?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah, hi. My name's Jerry, and I live near Fittiman Farm. Actually in Fittiman Farm. I'm a neighbor directly near this home. And I think it's unfair that there's only one side being told here by the Gathering Inn and Placer County. This home absolutely has a detrimental effect on the neighborhood. We've had 5 families that have sold their homes directly because of this home. The safety of our neighborhood has been impacted. There has not been just one call to police officers. There's been numerous calls. The problem is that Roseville PD does not have to record these calls if they're not disturbances. We've had numerous issues going on. The side being portrayed right now is by people who do not live near this home and who do not interact with the residents every day. Keith cannot go to a new home builder in West Roseville and purchase a home and say, I'm going to put 6 individuals there, because not a single home builder will sell him a house like this. But secretly shoving these kind of homes into residential neighborhoods with families directly in front of an elementary school is abhorrent. And it goes against everything that the city of Roseville stands for and what Placer County attempts to preach. These homes have a detrimental impact to the safety of neighborhoods. That is an undisputed fact. If you go around and talk to the neighbors living near this home and near this area, we're not letting our kids out of our homes now. We are looking at selling homes, and people are just completely fed up with this kind of secretive Gestapo tactics of purchasing homes in secret and then putting these kind of situations in residential, single-family residential zone neighborhoods. It's unfair to us as taxpayers who pay thousands of dollars in taxes and pay tremendous amounts of money for these homes in these areas to impact our safety and the safety of our children. That's what's most important here. And the comments that this doesn't affect property values, it may not affect property values in the grand scheme, but it affects your quality of life. 5 families have moved, and there are others that are looking to sell directly because of this home. There are incidents that happen, they're just not recorded and not portrayed, and it's unfair that there's only one side being portrayed here. Keith, Dr. Oldham, Jeff Smith, they do not have these homes in their neighborhoods, but they're putting them strategically in neighborhoods where people have no say, have no right, and they just have to put up with it or sell and move out. The quality of life in Roseville is going down directly because of these homes. I speak on behalf of a lot of neighbors in Fittiman Farm. We do not support permanent supportive housing because there is a tremendous amount of data that shows that it does not work. And if it did work, then San Francisco would be a utopia.
Thank you. Good evening. If you state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hi, my name is Natalie Grand. Many of you guys know me probably by now. I own a lot of homes in Roseville and in Rockland. One of my main residence homes in Rockland was actually, it is only a few houses down from the Gathering Inn, and it was purchased at the end of year 2019. And with that, the Gathering Inn did not, and it's in Yankee Hill Estates, a beautiful tucked away neighborhood. His PSH is on a greenbelt, very tight next to many families. And the picture he's saying about homes not selling, that they lose value, is not true at all. The neighbors next to it, one of them was abused, and he wanted to sell his home, could not sell his home for nothing. And he didn't want to go on record and said she didn't want to complain about the things that he saw because he was an old man who purchased a home and thought he would live there forever. And he actually got priced out of the market when he left. And it was very sad. And a lot of the young parents were sad for him because a lot of us are younger and we can regain our losses. But we made a bad decision trusting Placer County that they would look after, people that were the working class. So anyways, we went to Rockland City Council, and it was a very different story than what he's saying with the Roseville police. Jill Galliardo came out and said, you did not let our police officers know who put this home right next to a liquor store, not by any public services, not by an affordable grocery store. They are at the liquor store every single day. They catcall at children. That was brought up at the Rockland City Council. It was in a newspaper. None of them work at the one that's at our place. They all use drugs. They blow their smoke into the next door neighbors. They have parties. There's no curfews. They attract homeless new people that move in the neighborhood because the real estate agents don't want to tell people, but they're like, why is there homeless people walking around the neighborhood? And I'm like, a lot of us are like, hey, it's either the residents or new neighbors or it's their friends. And none of them are in drug rehabilitation. They don't work. Now, I'm not down on homeless because I actually have a lot of homeless people that have reached out to me, and they're asking for a fraction of what this Ritz-Carlton is. And they can't get any, they don't use drugs. They've never drank. They've never been in jail. And all they want is a lousy security deposit and have been turned away from the rental assistant program and the WPC whole person care program. And so, and maybe some of them will call in because I gave them the number. And so, anyways, the cost is enormous. And no other county did this. Homes with in-ground swimming pools, homes in the luxurious category. Most of them spent the money what it was meant for, mental health, to actually put a solution to this. So Placer County also, they tied in the first house principle to this, meaning that they don't have to give them a drug test. They don't have to be in any kind of drug rehabilitation. And the other counties, they actually did like mental health bans. And if they did start to touch housing, they did rental assistance, like help them out with a security deposit, things that encourage independent living. And so also Placer County made on their target list multiple documents that say recent release of incarceration, and there's a vulnerability score. The higher, the better. The higher the vulnerability means somebody that's out of jail, somebody that is mental ill or substance abuser. There is not a licensed staff on their supervision 24 hours. They do not carry something to sedate these people. In fact, there's no curfews. And so these other counties, they spent it on emergency landlords. They let the professionals. There is rooms. There is housing out there. And why can't they make their own food or actually get the help that they need? And so people out of jail should never have a permanent thing. That actually doesn't solve the homeless because that fills up beds. Because the nature of a homeless person, they need time to heal. Now, I know they got that one guy in Bonnie Gore. She said there was a veteran in it. That's great. I wish they were all those residents. But in Yankee Hill, we don't have those veteran people. We have addicts and people that push carts. I've had personal incidents at my property, and I got a cease and desist letter from the Gathering Inn for looking into its public funds.
Natalie?
So,
Natalie?
Yeah.
You've extended your time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, I believe that we have 4 more calls. How does the council feel about limiting them to 3 at this point? Or maybe we can ask if there's any other new content, and I'll give our speakers an opportunity to respond if they feel like it's appropriate. But are we good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Thank you. Mayor Berlusconi, City Council members, my name is Julie Cabroda. I'm a resident of Roseville for the past 24 years. I serve on the Roseville Joint Union High School District. I'm a former board member of the Gathering Inn, and I currently am the CEO of St. John's Program for Real Change, and it's a program for homeless women and children serving up to 300 women and children daily. Thank you so much for this presentation this evening. I am grateful to be here to be able to watch it. One of the most interesting things that I learned and admire about Roseville while serving as a planning commissioner was Roseville's vision and creativity through building specific plans. It's a whole community approach, and it was broken down into sizable communities and projects. And as the houseless community in Roseville and the county grows, I request your brilliance again in city leadership to create specific plans for addressing the complex issues surrounding homelessness. Dr. Olden and Mr. Dietrich spoke briefly to Housing First and permanent supportive housing. And both Housing First and permanent supportive housing are important tools, and at the same time can create an infrastructure that severely impacts the ability to deliver effective and comprehensive wraparound services, limit the vast needs for addressing the complexities of homelessness, including whole person care, mental health, domestic violence therapy, child services, trauma response, substance abuse and recovery, and most importantly, it can hamper outcomes. Now, at St. John's, our vision is to break the cycle of poverty and dependence one family at a time, and we administer a 12 to 18-month program with services, job training, housing support, mental health services, and parenting. Women leave our program with a job and a home, and because of our program, neighborhoods welcome our women and children that complete our program. So I want to invite you to take a tour and join me to see our residential campus in Sacramento. You can also visit our new modular homes funded by Project Home Key, which kind of opened this month if construction is finished. But I wanted to encourage you to look at the many communities that are looking at the unhoused communities, looking for fiscally effective and outcome-based results, and really do what Roseville does best, and that's building comprehensive and strategic solutions as a partner based on an intentional approach to do what's best for our residents in the unhoused community. And if I can add, tomorrow, you can join me online during the big day of giving at 1 p.m., where I'll host a virtual tour of our new home at St. John's. So thank you very, very much. I look forward to your plan and seeing what you do best.
Thank you. Good evening. If you state your name, you may make your comments now.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council.
Hello.
My name is Paul Boudier. I'm a business owner in the city of Roseville, live in the city of Roseville, and I'm calling this evening with the support of the permanent housing program in Roseville and Posher County.
Okay. You have no other comments?
It's a wonderful program that supports the community.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Well, I appreciate your support. I'm curious, have the city council members had an opportunity to visit any of the homes or properties?
Yes, there's been council members that have visited.
Wonderful. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. If you state your name, you may make your comments now.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bill Boudier, Boudier, and I think that was my son that called in just before. So we're not at the same place, but I guess we're both interested in the same topic. I was one of the founders of the Gathering Inn, and also have been around Roseville for a number of years doing work with homeless people back into the 1980s. And there's always been a thorny issue about, integrating homeless people into the community. And it's always been one that's been, just met with a lot of skepticism and even cynicism over the years. Now, I think this permanent supported housing program that has been instituted across the country is really a very beneficial thing to local communities, because it gives the local communities a chance to do things other than just policing and just trying to discourage the people from being there because they're going to be there anyway. I was part of the group that started the Lazarus Project also, and I can remember when we bought our first house, and it was a long, drawn-out process. Not the hearing process and all that, but just a matter of getting a loan at that time. And when we got underway, the people around the house seemed to be very satisfied with what was going on. There was a lot of questions, of course, and I think as long as the questions are addressed squarely, head-on, and accurately, there'll be a good rapport developed between the people in the house and the neighbors, because the importance of having these individuals in residential homes is to integrate them into the community and to make them feel like they're welcome. And with the case management that goes along with this and the services that are provided, I think it's just an outstanding arrangement with the county and the city. And I think it will help reduce a lot of overhead costs, especially regarding emergency hospitalizations and incidents with the police and so forth. So I'm very much in favor of this program. I think it's a very logical expansion of services to homeless people in the area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we have one more call.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Thank you, Mayor Bernasconi and the council. My name is Kathleen Crawford, and I am a relatively recent transplant to Roseville, having spent 40 years in Alameda County and Oakland. So I've seen many phases of the homeless problem and the issues around it. And I am very pleased to support the permanent supportive housing that has been discussed here tonight. It is clearly well thought out, planned, and although there may be some initial, break-in kind of problems in certain areas, long term, it is in the best interest of both the homeless and the city to be able to have this kind of program and to make it work. So I really do appreciate the fact that the city has had the foresight to work closely with the county and create a good program that will benefit those individuals as well as our community. Having them on the street is not an answer. Finding a way to integrate them in and motivate them to, turn their lives around is where we have to begin, and we have to persist in that. So I know that dealing with people who are different from us is sometimes a problem, but we need to be more accepting and tolerant and find ways to make this work. I think it is an excellent program and a great idea. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we do have one more call.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Yeah, my name's Frank Thomas.
All right, Frank, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm afraid that this evening's conversation has gotten so convoluted and distracted from its foundation. The whole person care is based on a foundation called Housing First. It's the Welfare Institute Code WIC 8255. Very brief. It's very simple. it basically states that the money, which is the money that's being used, that's being discussed here, for the most part, not all of it, there are some private grants and everything, but the program wouldn't exist without this money. So in effect, this is what the foundation is. It states by law that there can be no required treatment, no required sobriety, no required employment. Nothing can be required. Period. Nothing. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the homeless. Well, that's a broad subject. But for the most part, they're mentally ill. They have addictions. People that are mentally ill and addicted can't seek or ask for these services. If they aren't incentivized to require them, they will never get them. There are so many studies out there. The whole Housing First thing has been debunked years ago at the federal level. It's amazing that nobody knows what it is at this local level here, that it is completely debunked. There are studies showing that people actually survive longer on the street than they do in these programs because they're basically allowed to indulge themselves until they succumb. Now, granted, not all of them do. There are people like the Marine we were told about. There are isolated incidences, sure. But overall, the foundation is so corrupt. It's so faulty. Why would a city, a county, base everything on it? It needs to be rebooted. I think if you listen to Julie Hirata, the St. John's for Real Change, they found a way to use these funds. They found a way to make this work. Many other organizations.
Mr. Thomas, you've exceeded your time. Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
Are there any other calls this evening? Okay. Is there anyone tonight in the chambers who would like to talk to this item? Okay. And before we wrap up, Dr. Oldham or Jeff, or Keith, is there any other final comments that you'd like to make?
No, other than just to say thank you for the invitation. And again, maybe in response to Judy's comments, I appreciated the request for kind of a comprehensive plan. And so it sounds like we have that work afoot, that at least from the county side, it's one of our board's priorities for 2021 to do some comprehensive planning around homelessness involving the city. So look forward to partnering more on this work. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Are you good?
Thank you, Mayor. So the first gentleman's name was Gary? Was it Gary? Can you provide, or Gary, if you're listening, can you please call me at the gathering in 916-791-9355. I would love to have coffee, sit down with you, and hear your concerns about the program and how we may be able to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the council have any other further comments? I'll start on my left. Councilmember Alvord.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I got to visit the home, and I wasn't sure what to expect after engaging with some neighbors and a bunch of people that actually don't live there. They're just very concerned about the program. I was a little nervous myself about what I might find. And Keith and Nathan met me there, and I got to meet several of the residents at the home. And I got to tell you, the residents that I met, and I met with all but one of them, heard about the other one, and they normal people. That was a year I was campaigning for re-election, and I knocked on a ton of doors, and there weren't always normal people behind some of those doors. But the people I talked to in this house, I would not mind them being my neighbor. Nathan and I went and knocked on doors about 4 or 5 houses, both directions and across the street. and about half the people were home. And every single person we talked to, nobody was negative on it. One person said they were really negative because they'd gotten a flyer. I guess a flyer went around. It was a pretty negative flyer. But they said there hasn't been any problems. They're keeping an eye on it, but so far it seems like it might be okay. Other people were actually positive, and many people mentioned the flyer. A gentleman nearby actually broke down and cried. That was touching because he was talking about his own father and how he wishes his father wanted to better himself and be in a program like that. So, that meant a lot. And I can't. I know one neighbor was moving at the time. Another neighbor said they were already planning to move, had nothing to do with the house. So I don't know. I don't know that situation. The one thing I do want to say though is this is very stressful for the neighbors. This is really tough on the community. This particular house in Roseville, I think it seems like it's going to work out, that the residents there are currently pretty decent people, normal people. But I worry because, we've heard stories of other houses. I can't address those. I have no idea. And I've heard so many wild things that I don't even know what to believe on it. But this is, as a council member, this is a ton of pressure. I'm imagining you guys got some of the same stuff I had. And the community just is freaked out because they don't know. They don't know who's going to be there. Are those people going to be leering at my kid? From what I interpreted, those people were 100% human, just like I was. And so we got to figure out some way of helping the community feel better about this, because I don't want to go through this again. This is it's a very difficult thing. And again, I'm super proud of the guys that are there. Happy to be their neighbor. But I do worry, if we keep doing this, are we going to keep getting the quality residents that we've got right now? So that's my concern. And I know this isn't a decision that's even in our hand. I just want to put that out there. I hope during this homeless task force we come up with something that is very program oriented, that can help restore people and not risk a community. But I do ask the community, please be supportive. We've got one there now. They're our neighbors. They're 100% our neighbors. They're not homeless. This is their home. And I tell you, they're way better than a lot of renters that are around here and a lot of homeowners that are around here and some of the people's kids that are around in our neighborhood. So, give them a chance. Let's let these people be successful. But I encourage you guys to maybe find a better way if there's a way out there.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hadashout?
Yeah, the face of homelessness is a lot of different faces. It's not just one face. Maybe it's somebody who had an accident and suddenly has had a loss of income, right? Maybe it's a senior who, and the system of delivery is as varied as the face of homelessness. Later this month, I'll be at the Volunteers of America Shelter from the Storm event. We have folks like Julie Hirota with her program. We have AMI. We have whole person care. I had a chance to talk with our former housing director, Danielle Foster, who now works in the city. And I asked her, what is efficient? How do you address it? And she said, you need everything, right? Because homelessness is as diverse, the population of homelessness and the solutions are as diverse as that. Dr. Oldham and Jeff, I'd like to learn, and I'll be part of that task force, so not tonight, but the licensing and the requirements, because whenever there's a license, there's a requirement, right? How much do the tenants of or the occupants of whole person care need to fund? Is it 30% of the cost on a monthly basis? So those are some of the things I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I mean, we need the grace and the humanity to work as one Roseville.
Thank you. Councilmember Mondanza?
I won't add too much more to what my colleagues have already said, but Scott kind of touched on it a little bit too. I've lived in Roseville for a while, and I can tell you I have lived behind homeowners and renters that sound a heck of a lot worse than what was described on the phone today. I want to thank again Jeff and Dr. Oldham. I know you guys are hanging out there and on the phone line. And Keith, you and I have talked about this, I think, at least 3 times, if not 2 times. And I think it's worth mentioning that all of us here on the council, we were provided information about service calls, and nothing that I saw, nothing that was provided to me substantiates that these are engaging in criminal activities. I have gone out to the neighborhood because I got the addresses of these homes. I have not toured the home. I know Council Member Alvord has. I have not, so I can't speak to what Councilmember Alvord said, but what I can speak to is on the few times I drove through there, I did not see, a shopping cart city. I did not see people pitching tents on front yards. I did not see, if I did not know that was a permanent supportive housing address, I would have driven by it and not given it a second thought. Now, there are other areas in town, and I just finished walking precincts like Councilmember Alvord and Vice Mayor Havishelt last November. You don't know what you're going to get behind some of these homes. I think it's important to weigh the visual aspect of it and also be cognizant of the feelings that these neighbors are having because they're next to them. But I think, Keith, you pointed this out, and it was pointed out in the presentation earlier. You put up a great slide, and I know that you kind of glazed over it because you were trying to get through it for time. But I would encourage people to seek out the slide that you put on there about the home values, especially now in this crazy market where people are struggling to find rentals and the housing market. Buying a house now is insane. So the fact that the data is not driving these housing prices down, we're not seeing increased service levels, and those homes don't look any different than another home that you would see within that community. And it's not like we're seeking out gated communities. These aren't $1 million homes. These aren't backing up the golf courses. These are homes that are able to support the number of people that can live there before you have to get to the 6 or more to get a permit. So I think you're going to find more expensive homes because you have to have more bedrooms. So you can't hold that against this program because the home is at a higher price point. A, because the market has increased and adjusted insanely over the last several months, and B, you're just not going to find this program would not work in other communities where you have a 2 or 3 bedroom home because they're looking to maximize the occupancy and get the most out of helping those people that they support. And I just want to close. I should have let off with this, but I want to thank you, sir, for your service, and I appreciate that you're doing well. And I want to continue to encourage you on this path. And I just wanted to be remiss if I didn't thank you for that. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Mendonça. Councilmember Rakucci?
I think the comment I would have is, there were still requirements for these people to be able to be in these homes. I mean, they had criteria to be in there, and they have someone who comes every day to check on them, and if they have appointments, and if that appointments are for mental health or doctor's appointments or job interviews, that's an option that they have. And the fact that these people have to act just like any other neighbor. And if they do something out of line and like any other neighbor would, then there's consequences. I know other neighborhoods that have real issues of people with having mental illness, and they're not homeless. They're in a house with an aged mother, and the kid is my age. It's like. And it's hard, and want to make sure that they're safe and their neighbors are safe. So I think in this situation, it's geared to making sure that they can stay, whether it's a short period of time or transition out or be a little bit longer. But they do have people watching them, and it sure sounds like if they're not towing the line, they won't be staying there.
Thank you. And my comments are also brief too. You know, as a rule, we don't get to pick who moves into our neighborhood, and this is no exception. And what we've heard tonight and we've learned in the course of learning more about this program is that none of us up here have a say in being able to govern this program. We want to continue to partner with Placer County and the whole person program and the Gathering In, and to make sure that our community is aware of the rights that these folks have, and to ensure the safety of the community. And I have not heard anything in the course of these programs running in neighborhoods that would make me think otherwise. I know they're new and new things can be uncertain, but we want to just continue to have conversations as opportunities become available to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of our residents, all of them. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for sticking it out on the phone. We made this technology work.
This is our first time, right, of doing this?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, worked out well.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know we really haven't even gotten to a lot of the meat of our program this evening. So with that, I will close public comment. This is an information item only, and we will move on. So we will move on to public comment this evening. Now is the time for anyone to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda. We will, I'll take phone calls first. I understand that we have one phone call, so we'll put that through, and then we'll take comments from the audience.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you make your comments now.
Hello, this is Barbara Brass.
Barbara, can you turn your television down, please?
Yes, I did. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
This is for public comment on the resolution proclamation for the LGBT rainbow flag to be flown.
This is just public comment on any item not on the agenda.
Yeah.
So,
any item. Okay, yes, and that's what I'm talking about. There is a proclamation to have Roseville acknowledge Pride Month in June, and we are all about doing that and glad that Roseville will honor the proclamation, but we also ask that the rainbow flag be flown, hopefully in a prominent location, to let the citizens know that Roseville supports all of its residents, and every time somebody sees that flag who happens to be a part of that community, of which I am one, it gives me a sense that my community cares, and it also gives people a sense that there's a reason to be involved in our community. And as another part of my time, I want to introduce my wife, Colonel Patsy Thompson, retired military, and she has a few words to say.
Hi, this is Colonel Thompson. I am a proud veteran, and I am calling regarding the Pride Month in June that my wife mentioned, and I'm requesting that the city of Roseville take this opportunity to acknowledge and respect the LGBTQ community by flying the rainbow flag at City Hall. During my long military career as a nurse, I did my best to conceal the real me, which was necessary if I wanted to continue my my profession and my time in the military. I experienced discrimination because I was not allowed to be who I really was, which led to some PTSD lasting for many years. So glad that things are improved for today's military members in that respect. As a veteran, I look forward to seeing our rainbow flag proudly displayed in the city that I love so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we have 4 more calls.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hi, this is Wendy Garrick with the Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi there. So, again, Wendy Garrick with the Chamber, and I just wanted to take the opportunity this evening to thank the city's Economic Development Department for partnering with the Chamber in applying for that Placer Shares Grant number 3. We were awarded $200,000, which went to support local restaurants, and we purchased the gift cards, and with the help of the City Council and our supervisors representing Roseville and Granite Bay, we were able to distribute the gift cards to local senior care facilities, along with grocery store employees and 300 plus students from Sierra College and the public safety classes that are held. And again, I'd probably still be walking the streets if I had to deliver them myself. So I want to thank the City Council for stepping up and helping us. And that's probably one of the funner assignments that you're going to have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Sure. My name is Holly Cuthbertson, and I just wanted to take a moment to read an excerpt from a letter I wrote this week to the council, and it was in support of recognizing Pride Month. And what I said in my letter was, many of my loved ones that live in Roseville are LGBTQ or allies, so I strongly support the city's new goal, which is to strengthen supporting inclusiveness in partnership with the community. This is consistent with everything I love and have seen happen in Roseville since I moved here in 2010. So I'm grateful to see it as a city goal. The month of June offers the perfect opportunity to support that goal with a thoughtful council action. A Pride Month proclamation is a simple gesture to support our LGBTQ community, and it is consistent with the actions of many successful and innovative communities that declare that they value the voice of all community members. To actualize the goal in partnership with the community means to listen now to the voices that are asking for a proclamation and even a little bit more. Flying the rainbow flag outside City Hall in June is a clear way to show support for the whole community. And I understand some folks might disagree or feel like it might be a slippery slope, but I would offer this to you. The rainbow flag has decades of history behind it, and LGBTQ people transcend any specific culture, race, political affiliation, place and time, age, religion. The rainbow flag does honor human diversity, and our community should celebrate it. Flying the rainbow flag on city property would activate the city's commitment that's made to promoting the health and safety of all community members. It's a kind gesture that you all have the power to give, and it sends a compassionate message about who we are as a caring, inclusive, and equality-minded community. It would garner the attention of neighboring communities because Roseville has been setting the bar with good leadership and doing what is right for many years. Please adopt the proclamation recognizing June as LGBTQ Pride Month and fly the rainbow flag at City Hall during the month of June to demonstrate that the work being done towards inclusiveness within the city is genuine and real. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Good evening. If you state your name, you may make your comments now.
Thank you. My name is Paul Griffin, and to acknowledge the public service employees for this week, I did want to reach out and thank the Engineering and Planning Division employees for assistance in repaving and restriping South Vernon in the Cresthaven neighborhood, and also for redoing our tennis courts. It was wonderful to work with those individuals, and I wish them well in the future. Also, I want to inquire and also advocate for something that our new Chief of Police, Chief Bergstrom, has advocated for, and that is the Axios, or officer-worn body cameras. I really want to push forward that to get approved as quickly as possible, especially as we get into summer months. As we come out of COVID, I think it's going to be much more important for the officers to be able to document and record the incidents that occur around town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Crawford, and in the interest of time, I'm going to just tell you that I totally support what Barbara Braff, Colonel Pat, and Holly Cuthbertson have said about the importance and significance of both the resolution in support of Pride Month as well as flying the Pride flag. So I won't belabor the point, but I can assure you that many of us in the community who are allies and friends and supporters would appreciate a kind and thoughtful gesture on the part of this council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that concludes our phone calls. Is there anyone this evening that would like to talk about any item that is not on the agenda? You can come forward. Just state your name.
Hello, good evening, Council and Mayor Bernasconi. My name is Ellen DeBach Riley. I am a resident of Roseville since, I can't read my own writing, 1998, and the parent of 2 boys that I raised and schooled here. And I'm also a lesbian. Roseville is my home. It's the only home that my children know. And I love Roseville, but there is discrimination here. And even now as I speak, I fear the other volunteer roles that I fill in our city is going to be negatively impacted because of my testimony. My wife, as a small business owner here in Roseville, could also be negatively impacted because of my testimony. You've read the multiple letters from supporters expressing a variety of reasons why flying the rainbow flag is important. The flag not only represents LGBT people and their allies, but also serves as a general symbol of social equality. I know the federal and state flags are supposed to represent all of us, but we have not yet achieved equal treatment, or LGBT people will not be a protected class under discrimination laws. Flying the rainbow flag is allowed over U.S. embassies worldwide when, quote, appropriate in light of local conditions. If the people are being discriminated locally and violent retribution is prohibited, then it is appropriate, especially at the local level. The city survey results that we just heard on April 29th revealed the lowest measure for our city was in inclusivity and engagement, specifically in residents' connection and engagement with their community. Flying the flag is a concrete way to build a positive connection. By definition, good governance is equitable and inclusive. Councilmember Mendoza, before you were elected, you said you would support flying the flag. I look forward to your making good on that promise. You said if you could, you would, and you can. Vice Mayor Hodescheld, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. No. You also have agreed to support me on this issue. You spoke your truth on the importance of bringing in diversity and serving the humanity of all our citizens. Please be true to your word. Councilmember Alvord, you have family members close to you who identify as LGBT. Having this personal understanding should compel you to support this effort. Councilmember Rakucci, in your own words, a lot of new people are coming to Roseville. You said, let's embrace them and what they can add to our city. That includes LGBT people coming here just like I did 30 years ago. There was a recent poll that found 1 in 6 Generation Z adults consider themselves LGBT. They have a lot to offer our city. Mayor Bernasconi, I am truly grateful.
Ellen, you need to wrap up your comments. You've exceeded your time.
30 seconds, if that would be all right.
Go ahead.
I'm truly grateful for having the proclamation on the agenda in June. It demonstrates your empathy. But we all know only a small group of people will know about the proclamation. And to your concern about others asking to fly their flags, make a policy that declines flags representing formal organizations and explicitly state that it's not being flown on behalf of any individual, but as a form of government speech protected by the First Amendment. You and your council can do this. This will do no harm, but it could do a lot of good. It's a simple ask. Please approve flying the rainbow flag over City Hall in celebration of Pride for the month of June. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else tonight? Go ahead. I'll have your comment, and then I know that we have another phone call, and then we'll wrap up in chamber, so I know.
One more.
Oh. Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Em. I'm a Roseville resident in downtown Roseville. And I just wanted to express my support for flying the rainbow flag at City Hall in the month of June. As we struggle as a country with who we are and what we stand for, something that has always been clear: we are all equal under the Constitution. Although this idea is something that we've always stood for, it really has been a struggle to see that become a reality. For the LGBT community, we have struggled and to be recognized, and we have fought feverishly for our rights. Our unifying representation of our community has always been to fly a rainbow flag. It is now common in many cities throughout California to recognize and support members of the LGBT community. As diversity has increased dramatically, I have also known the uneasy and threatening looks that were given to me when my girlfriend and I went to an Olive Garden one day. In our own city in 2019, a Roseville family was met with homophobic and racial slurs sprayed across concrete in Mark White Park. When a family attempted to explain the slurs to their children, they were devastated. We want to fly the rainbow flag for those kids so that they know Roseville has their back. The first rainbow flag was created in 1978, hand-sewn together by Gilbert Baker and dozens of others volunteers for his friend Harvey Milk in the San Francisco Freedom Day parade. The meaning of each color is: red is for life, orange is for healing, yellow is for sunlight, green is for nature, indigo for serenity, and violet for spirit. The flag has stripes representing the inclusion of racial equity and acknowledgement of trans rights. The flag represents the inclusivity of people's rights that we have fought so hard for. Harvey Milk said, "It's not about personal gain. It is not about ego. It is not about power. It is about giving those young people out there hope." He's led the way in the LGBT movement since. And Beyond Milk's challenge describes this with these words: "A true flag cannot be designed. It has to be bared from the souls of its people." The Trevor Project estimates that nearly half of LGBT youth have contemplated suicide in the last year. 60% of trans and non-binary youth have reported engaging in self-harm of some kind. This is hard for me to talk about because I find myself comfortably and uncomfortably within those statistics. It has been a long struggle to accept myself as a lesbian because I thought that I was going to hell.
Excuse me, you've extended your time. If you could wrap it up.
Yes, I will. For me, we fly the pride flag for all the young people that we do not see and supported and recognized for who they are. We fly the flag for the child that wasn't so lucky and that was cast out and rejected. We have their backs, and it's time that we show it.
Thank you very much for your comments. Lynn, do you want us to take the call?
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
My name is Bob Tomes Jessup, United States Marine Corps Master Sergeant retired. I just wanted to weigh in about this flag issue. Now, the first thing is, I served in Quezon in 1968. My daddy was Army, landed in the 34th Infantry Division, Red Bull Division, Amesville, 1943. Now, if we're going to use the grievances and oppression by the United States government as criterion for flying the flag on that pole on Vernon Street, y'all going to have a long list of flags you got to fly. You're going to have to fly a flag commemorating the African Americans that was destroyed by the United States government with COINTELPRO, members of the American Indian movement, including Leonard Peltier, wrongfully locked up as part of COINTELPRO. You're going to have to fly a Mormon flag because the Mormons was driven out of Nauvoo, Illinois with the sanction of the United States government. Now, this is nonsense. And what you guys need to be doing is you need to get that Christopher Columbus statue back up. That's your move, because you didn't want to confront these types of people. And as for all the equality, inclusivity, and tolerance, try voting against this, and you'll see how inclusive and tolerant these folks are. Now, recently our president made a statement that the biggest threat to this country is white supremacists. Being a lifelong Californian, I would offer the theory that the greatest threat to this country are Bay Area white liberals that metastasize to places like Roseville and replicate the cancer that destroyed the communities they left. Show some backbone. The American state flag flies on that flag and nobody else's flag. I don't care if people want a MAGA flag up there and Cheeto Jesus Donald Trump himself comes down and asks for it to be flown. There's one flag on there, and that's Old Glory. Thank you. God bless the United States of America.
Thank you.
Is that the last call? Okay. All right. Thank you. Make your comment. One more comment.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Huber. I'm a member of the Roseville Joint Union High School District, and I last week met with Vice Mayor Haudeschelt and Councilmember Rakucci and City Manager Casey. And I want to thank you for the great working relationship that we have. Ultimately, it benefits all of the citizens in our community, not just the students of our district. Madam Mayor, I want to thank you for the opportunity to say the pledge tonight. I am grateful for this country, and I'm proud to be a resident of this city. And I will say this, I'm grateful for your leadership and for the very high quality of those that you have selected to lead this city. I will sort of take a side note. I want to echo the comments of one of the individuals that was here. I looked for a flag policy quickly, and I didn't see one. And forgive me, but my day job, I am a city attorney by trade, a public agency lawyer by trade, and you have excellent counsel here. But if you don't have a policy, then you ought to have the city attorney's office do that significant research and create a policy. Once you have that policy in place, then staff can just administer the policy without any issues. They can do it in a manner without any risk for allegations of viewpoint discrimination. By all accounts, the pride flag is a worthy flag to be flown. The risk really doesn't come from flying that flag. It comes from the subsequent denial in the absence of a policy. You've got to have a policy, because if you don't, I use the analogy. It's like you're juggling balls of lava. You're going to get burned. And so if I can be so bold, I would highly recommend that you provide some direction to your very capable city attorney's office to do the research, come up with a policy, and bring it back for your consideration. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else here this evening that would like to make a comment not on the agenda? And no other phone calls? Okay, I'll close public comment. We'll move on to the consent calendar.
All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be passed by one motion. There will be no discussion of consent calendar items unless a member of the City Council, staff, or the public request a specific item be removed. This evening, we have no staff requests or no requests by the City Council. Mayor Bernasconi, if you'd just offer a few moments to see if anyone calls in to request an item be removed.
Thank you. Are there any calls just yet on the consent calendar? All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds for the delay.
Hearing no phone calls, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as recommended?
So moved.
Second. Vice Mayor Haudeschelt.
Yes.
Councilmember Albert?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we will move in now to item 8.1, status report on space plan efforts and future real estate needs for expanded operations.
There's a solid guy.
Good evening, council members.
That was bad.
That was really bad.
It's true. It's true.
I congratulated him on his 8 years.
Yeah.
Hi, Devin.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good.
So, good evening, council members. And this evening, we're going to talk about space planning efforts and future real estate needs for operational expansion. In 2017, EU staff began coordinating with other city departments to forecast needs at the corporation yard for the next 30 years. In conclusion, EU continued the, Jesus, sorry about that, guys. In conclusion, we discovered that we need additional property and that the site does not provide the additional space we need for the future. So in 2018, we contracted with HDR Engineering to validate staff assumptions, and HDR went over the numbers that we came up with. Growth projections. Next slide. So the growth projections, the city is expected to grow 154% over the next 30 years. And that's based on a 1.28 growth factor. This will basically double the corporation yard size, and we will need 39 additional acres. If you look at the figure on the slide, you will see that blue area. And what that is, that's the additional space that we will need over the next 30 years. And that's a conservative estimate. Another thing to consider when you look at this slide, you're going to see that there's buildings and other things within that blue area that the city currently doesn't own. So we can't simply just expand the corporation yard to get the space that we need. Next slide. Operational risk. If we do not acquire additional property, we're going to run out of space essentially for parking equipment, personnel areas, and trucks. And then also any type of operational risks such as a new regulation or a new service that we want to provide, we will not have the space and adequate area to perform those utility operations. Next slide. So right here, you're going to see a conceptual layout of a potential new facility that we'd be looking at. So it's going to have a fleet area, and it's going to have other operational storage areas. It will have an administrative building in the front for new personnel. And then also you look on the right-hand side, and it's going to have a transfer station and other processing areas. And what this area is for, it's essentially we're hedging risk. And if anything happens to one of our regional facilities, we want to have the space over the next 30 years for us to continue solid waste operations. So tonight we are seeking council direction basically on how to proceed here. So first we want to look at, should we consider properties inside the city of Roseville or outside the city of Roseville? Should we look at properties that are currently city owned? Should we look at large contiguous properties, or should we look at multiple lots that we can kind of put together to make a facility? And then also adjacent land uses. We need to look at something that has a compatibility for industrial use near the facility. And then any other thoughts you may have. So now I will pass it back to the council as we seek direction for property acquisition.
Thank you very much. Does the council have any questions of Devin? We'll start with Vice Mayor Houghton.
Devin, I don't do math very well in my head. 154% over 30 years. So right now we're about 100. Let me ask it this way. Is that population growth or is that service need? So including the business community plus is that dwelling unit equivalents?
No, so that would be population growth based upon that 1.28 growth factor compounded over 30 years.
So in 30 years, the city of Roseville's population will be roughly 320,000 people?
Correct. And that's based off of strictly using a inflator over, compounded over 30 years.
Are any of these facilities are exclusively, unlike the South Placer Wastewater Authority, these properties or this need is exclusively for the city of Roseville?
At this point, basically we're trying to build an operational plan to give ourselves a contingency in case some of these other facilities are no longer useful, let's just say in the next 10 years, or if we need to make alternative plans to make sure that we have options. So we always want to make sure that we have multiple options rather than just having a singular option. And right now we don't have the space to expand to the need that we need to get to.
And have you looked at operational efficiencies, what the Citizens Priority Advisory Committee asked that be looked at for?
Right. So basically, in the waste industry, the whole entire industry is built off efficiencies. So, for example, every 3,500 to 4,000 homes, we need to add a new truck and a new driver, and that's to collect waste just the way we're doing it now. Now, in the future, you're going to see in a later presentation here this evening, we're going to be having to add routes for new state regulations, and that's not really captured in this presentation here, this one I'm doing right now. And then there's also going to be a need for us to potentially electrify our fleet by 2027. It's called the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation. If we do that right now with the current technology we have, we would have to double our fleet because you can only pick up about 400 homes per day with a truck, and we currently do 800 homes to 900 homes per day with a diesel or a compressed natural gas truck. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does,
but,
and and I apologize for asking multiple. What's the build out of the city of Roseville?
The build out is in the 2050 timeframe, so that kind of puts us with this here.
So we're going to get to 320 without ever annexing or adding anything else.
So we didn't look at it in that kind of, we looked at it strictly based upon a growth factor. So the 1.28% compounded over 30 years.
I'm good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Councilmember Albert, do you have any questions?
I think that, I don't have comments, so maybe I'll wait.
Either way, go ahead if you want.
Roseville is self-reliant, as we all know, and we are, as residents, greatly benefit from having our own utilities. We're running them ourselves, keeping our costs down. Once we outsource, everything starts going up, and it's totally out of our control. I think that if we don't plan ahead, we're going to lose the opportunity to remain self-sufficient, possibly, and that would be the worst decision for us. I don't know what future councils are going to do. I know Roseville is in a unique situation, kind of like Lincoln. We don't have hard-defined borders. There is a chance some future council may choose to grow the city even more. Kind of hope not, but if it happens, we won't be here to make that decision. But I think we need to make a decision that if something like that was to happen, we didn't just cause a major problem for our residents. So I appreciate reading through the material. Is pretty eye-opening that I think we really need to appreciate you guys bringing that forward. This would be a huge loss if we didn't think about this and do something about it. So,
thank you. Councilmember Mendonça, any comments, or Councilmember Acucci?
No comments at this time.
Okay.
I think your presentation is very, very real. And I agree with Councilmember Albert that we need to plan for the future. And looking at areas that fit our needs are very difficult. So we better look now while we have that opportunity. You put all the options to look at. I'd like to be it in the city of Roseville, but I would say look at what looks good for our solid waste corporation and our needs, and it's better to have it now than later. And like I said, we're making the changes of electrifying possibly our heavy equipment, and that'll take more space, and a lot of changes. Better to be ready.
Thank you very much. I will open it up to public comment now. We have no one has called about this item. Okay. It was compelling, but I don't know if that compelling. But
I don't think so.
Is there anyone tonight who would like to talk about this item? Okay, I'll close public comment. Does the council have any other comments before we have an action?
Thank you for the insight, all the updates.
No problem.
Yeah, I think that you have done a really good job of keeping all of us informed about what happens in your department. And I think that this is just one more example of Roseville being forward thinking. And I think this is the right time for sure. If we don't do it now, the outskirts of town won't be available. Pauline can tell us what used to be on the outskirts of town. Yeah, no longer the case. Okay, so unless there's other comments, we'll have a motion.
The direction is to direct staff to locate a site in the city of Roseville that provides a collective of approximately 30 acres, with the site providing an area large enough that allows room for future growth of the city's solid waste, water, and technical services division.
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci? Yes. Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes, thank you. Are we all good doing fine on time, or does anybody need a little break?
It's good. What's the
Good,
pleasure of the
do you want
mayor?
a break?
Devin,
If
did
you
you have
wanna-
questions?
If you want just a,
Can we maybe just break for maybe like a quick, very quick 5 minutes? We've been at it for a couple hours and, okay. Okay, thanks for hanging in there with us. We will move on to item 8.2, Environmental Utilities Department, and we'll have a budget update, I believe, from Mr. Plecker.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. I'm Rich Plecker. I'm your Environmental Utilities Director. I've taken off my mask because people have told me that I'm hard enough to understand, enough as it is, so I'm going to do that, try to keep myself clean. In light of the hour this evening, I'm going to try to go pretty quick, but I want to also offer the opportunity, if you got any questions for me, please ask them. So with that said, let's go. So overall, EU, we do this every year. Much of this is repetitive, a little bit repetitive for you, but I just want to say this just for those at home who might be listening or those who might be interested. EU is a growing, progressive, customer-focused department. We plan our finances on a 10-year planning horizon. We've tried to anticipate into the future 10 years and then forecast those things. We always say, too, that our goal is to operate the highest value utilities, not necessarily the lowest cost. We are often amongst the lowest cost providers in the region, but that's actually not our goal. As I've said before, it's easy to be the lowest cost. We just stop doing things, and that's really not the goal. We do retain a 98% customer satisfaction level. That's in contrast to what you were told in a different survey last week, that we were at 97. So it's probably in that margin of error someplace. Operate very, very high customer satisfaction. We're funded by user rates, not taxes. This is something we have to remind people of frequently. Utilities are not taxes per se. They're paid for by users and how much you use. Consequently, we run more like a business. It's an enterprise fund. It's a different method of accounting than the general fund. We handle money differently than other parts of the city. The council has historically preferred rate adjustments that are smaller and more frequent, as opposed to putting those rate increases off into larger chunks of time, like every 5 years, every 10 years. Probably very ill-advised in today's very regulatory dominant environment. You just can't anticipate those costs. We also happen to be a significant contributor to the general fund. We're frequent abusers of the city attorney's office, HR, finance, all the others. We're a very large department in terms of numbers of people, and we pay for that. And that's as opposed to us hiring our own staff that does that. So we're a significant source of funding, I guess, to the general fund. So our overall focus is continued service reliability and rehabilitation, which you're going to hear a lot more about later in the rates presentation, but these are sort of the cornerstones of what we do. We provide service, and we're very focused on reliability and continued rehabilitation. So on the next slide, here is a new thing as of a couple years ago. Dennis actually made me put numbers in the budget forecast slide, so here you go. None of these will be a shock to you. You've seen these before. You're going to see them again in rates, and you're going to see them again in budget again. We're showing some growth in both water, wastewater, and in waste services. Those are a little bit different, basically based on the conditions, which again we will explain in more depth a little bit later. But we're growing. We're growing organically in terms of number of customers. We're also growing in terms of our scope, what we're required to do. Not all of those things in our scope are things that we would do if we could choose to do them. We have some help from external parties that help us choose the things we do. So our growth is kind of a combination of those two things. Next slide. It's also important, and I want to show progress towards meeting Dennis's goals. Here's a pie chart. No financial forecast is complete or presentation.
Oh, that's clever.
Pardon?
Clever.
So this pie chart sort of designates, what's the rough ratio. Basically, you're looking 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of the entire department. So a little bit of that. I wasn't anticipating it being that late of a night. Next slide. You've seen this before as well. We talk about sort of the EU core functions. That's water, wastewater, waste services, stormwater, recycled water. Those are the day in, day out activities that we provide to the community 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. In these little arrows that point upward, here's some areas of particular focus as we move forward, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these as we move into the next slide. Fiscal performance. Next slide, please. we've had kind of an interesting year this last year with COVID. There have been quite a few restrictions. Many people have experienced the stay-at-home orders. Actually, there was no relaxation on us from a regulatory standpoint. In fact, there were some increases in our preventive maintenance type of activities to maintain health and safety. We've had some budget fluctuations as a result of that. We had a number of people staying at home, consuming larger quantities of water, and with a legitimate need to use larger quantities of water to maintain healthy situations. So we've had some ups and downs in the revenues. This last year, we've over-realized some revenues and we've under-realized expenses, which is a good thing because those monies are then stuck in our savings account for rehab and other purposes for in the future. So it was a good year last year. We're expecting some reduction of that this year. We're expecting to hear some news about maybe saving some water this year in light of the drought conditions. That'll come a little bit later, but we expect there to be some adjustment there. We have proposals in place for rate adjustments. You'll hear about again in a little bit. To the tune of water, we're proposing an adjustment of $1.39 a month, wastewater $2.68 a month, waste services $4.21. For overall, it's a little over $8 an adjustment for this next year. On the next slide, talk about unfunded mandates. This is one of our, in recent years, this has been a huge driver for us in terms of cost. These are some examples of regulations that we've had to deal with. First and foremost is SB 1383, which has basically told us that we have to divert organics from the landfill to a composting facility or some other area besides the landfill by the 2022-2025 timeframe. We expect this to cost us operationally $5 to $10 million a year. So roughly a third of our existing budget right now in solid waste is going to be devoted to these types of activities and organics. Then we can talk about this. This is Bruce's favorite, ELAP. This is a laboratory accreditation program that we get to spend about $250,000 a year to check numbers and then re-report the already checked numbers to the state again. NPDES, nitrate reduction. I don't really need to go through all of these, but suffice it to say, our legislature is very active, and a lot of, I think, really good ideas come out sometimes. They don't really get thought through to the extent at scale, and they wind up costing our utilities customers a great deal of money. We try to deal with it. Most important point here is that in 2016, we sort of changed our approach to how we deal with legislation and regulation proposals. This says over on the left-hand side, we got into a little bit more offensive mode, offensive in the sense of being proactive with respect to authoring legislation which is intended to defeat, in some cases, legislation that's being proposed or already proposed, which we don't agree with. Now, we don't do that necessarily on our own. We do that in coordination with our industry associations and others, but we've amplified our game a great deal since 2016. And I think it's paying off, and a number of these laws that were passed could have been much worse had it not been for some of that interaction. So on the next slide, talk real quick about our resource portfolio. Constant harp of ours about groundwater infrastructure planning. We were just here recently talking about WIFIA, continuing to bolster Roseville's reliability, continuing to maintain our affordability, always looking for what's our plan B, what's our plan C, what happens in this changing world, how do we protect ourselves from the outside influences which we have no control over. At some point, we'll have exhausted all of those opportunities, but we're not there yet, quite frankly. So we continue to look for those. In addition, we continue to understand our role, I think, a little bit better as a regional partner and also at the statewide level in policy. Roseville's proven to be a pretty interesting community for others to partner with and for us to partner with them. We're a bit unique in the sense that we're a full-service city. We own our own utilities. We have a different perspective than many organizations that are utility-only focused or other organizations that are only general fund focused. So we sort of feel a niche there. We've talked about long-term water resource planning and portfolio development, much like your investment strategy. We're not in all stocks. We're not in all bonds. We're not in all cash. We're in the entire market and everything when it comes to water. Some is better, some is cheaper, some's more expensive, but it's all designed to be there when we need it. Key issue, and I spoke to this earlier about rehabilitation of key water assets. We have water assets that range from 1 day old on the west side of town to other areas that are over 100 years old in central Roseville. And so balancing and making sure that we're rehabilitating the infrastructure that serves our citizens sort of in a more or less continuous fashion is one of those activities. To the tune on the water side, it's about $10 million or so a year. Some years more, some years less, but about a $10 million investment in the community just rebuilding that infrastructure. So the next slide, workforce development. This is interesting. I won't spend a lot of time because we've talked about it before, but our workforce is evolving. Young people are not necessarily thinking that utilities are a great career to go into, mainly because they just don't know. So we've really amplified a number of our recruiting efforts with our partners in HR and other departments, putting on career fairs, starting to introduce young people to possible careers in the utilities, be that in the sciences or finance or the many areas that we cover, all the way through to the trades. You've heard me say this before, that I don't really have a problem hiring engineers anymore, but what I have a problem hiring is welders. That's really tough. And so to keep that in balance and sort of grow that as we grow the organization is very important. Likewise, we're creating succession plans for a number of ourselves. Like, and I'll use myself as an example. I plan on working every single day the rest of my life. And so we have to have a structured plan for how do we move people up through the organization and gain the skills that they need to have. So that proves to be a little bit challenging sometimes in a city environment, but I think we're doing a pretty good job of moving people around, getting them the experience that they need. And then lastly, as I said before, we try to use our sense of values, our culture, which I think has really paid off, especially in this last year during COVID, where we had a lot of conflicting information. Much of it was at odds. But I think it was our culture that drove us through because our people knew what needed to get done, when it needed to get done, and they had actually the authority to deliver those services to our customers. So it proves to me that this is something we continue to need to invest in. Next slide. This is where you get to ask any questions you like.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start on my right side and just kind of work our way down.
I really don't think so. I think you did a really good job of showing all the changes that are occurring with legislation, and we have to keep up to our needs, and that it's and as you said, our infrastructure could be 1 week old to 100 years old, so we have to deal with that. So thank you for the presentation.
Great presentation, and just so you know, on the succession planning, you can't leave. We're just going to increase the number of days you get to go. Yeah, you get to go fishing a couple more days a year. We're going to increase that, but
that might extend.
Yeah, we're not going to let you leave.
Rich, you touched on something really quickly, and I think it's an important dynamic. I want to make sure everybody understands. We are in an extraordinary year.
Yes.
A year that is historical, and that's not hyperbole. We have some resiliency. You've had some vision around how do we continue to provide water when Folsom is a sandbox, right? Mm-hmm. We have our ASR, we have some groundwater, we have SMUD. But what I wanted to kind of focus in on is when we conserve, there's a revenue reduction, but not an operational cost reduction. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's correct. And it might be a comment more appropriate for the rate presentation that's to follow, but real briefly, there's two portions of water, in particular revenue. There's a fixed component and there's a variable component. And the fixed component accounts for sort of the investment in plant that we have, the fixed costs that we have. And so I'll use myself as an example. My water bill, give or take 60% of it is fixed and 40% of it's variable. And the variable component it varies with our cost as it varies, whether that's power, whether that's other variable factors. And there's not a lot of variable factors either. So the fact that it's 40% is fairly high. It used to be higher. A lot of water conservation groups were really pushing to place most of the emphasis on variable rates. But what we learned in the last drought is that causes revenue instability. And revenue stability for a water utility is almost like a death spiral because you all of a sudden can't meet bond covenants, you can't do lots of things. And we found ourselves in that circumstance where people were literally conserving too much. And so we had to go through this years ago and sort of remedy that to kind of restabilize things so that we could ask for conservation and not go bankrupt at the same time, meet our needs, but at the same time provide enough of an economic signal where it made it worthwhile to people.
And that's so stated so excellently. It's the unintended consequences of charitable and wealth.
Yes.
Well-intended policy.
Yes. There's a lot of things that we thought were great
pocketbook.
ideas in the 90s that proved to not be such great
Thank
ideas.
you, Rich.
Yeah, a question and 2 comments. So I heard that, in fact, I was asked this, the chlorine's gone up about 70% because of plant problem and all that. Are we in contract for the pricing, or does that affect us directly with those kinds of big increases? Are we in contract like long-term so it doesn't affect us as much?
And we buy in bulk, too. So that's another thing. That was specifically, if I'm understanding what you're referring to, a lot of homes built pools during the last year. And so that's caused the resurgence in demand. Most of that's in pelletized form. We use liquid chlorine now, hypochlorite.
And there was a plant that...
We also have a plant we
Schroeder's-
can manufacture it, too.
Cool.
So we've got, again, we sort of have a plan B. That's not our optimal, but we purchase chlorine in bulk on a regional basis, so we get bulk pricing. I'm not expecting, although I could be wrong, that we could face some fluctuation in the chlorine cost.
Great. And then a couple of comments. You mentioned highest value is not necessarily the lowest cost, but lowest cost does have a lot to do with highest value. So as a ratepayer myself, it's nice to have both. We like the value.
We have this conversation every year, Scott.
Yes, I know. I just want to keep mentioning that to you because as a council member, it's really nice when we have low cost along with the great value we've got. And then I just wanted to add on, I'm really impressed with the succession planning you talked about. I remember when you opened up the aquifer storage and recovery wells and turning them on low to start just to make sure that you could train the new guys before the old guys retired. And so I thought that was really smart, and it was kind of neat to watch that. And I thought that was some good forward thinking. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to public comment if the council is done with their comments and shaking their head. No phone calls. Okay. We'll give it just a few seconds. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to speak to this item?
Pray for rain.
Always pray for rain.
Okay. We'll close public comment and see if we're all done. No other questions? Okay, so this is information item only.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Liquor.
Okay, and next up we have item 8.3, the Roseville Electric Utility Budget Update. Good evening, Michelle.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi. Michelle Bertolino, Roseville Electric Utility Director. Council members, I'm here tonight to hopefully provide as riveting of a presentation as Rich did, although mine might be a little bit more boring. I don't have a pie chart, I don't think, so maybe we'll get a cake chart or something next time. Okay. Similar to Rich's, this is very similar to the last 2 years of budgets that we've provided to you. We're presenting a balanced budget. We're prioritizing all of our essential services, compliance with all of our financial policies and our metrics, as well as all of the regulatory requirements we have, as Rich mentioned, on the water and wastewater and solid waste side. We make very, very strategic and prudent investments in infrastructure and technology. We do quite a bit to support development in Roseville, and a lot of the reasons why people come to Roseville and are successful in Roseville is because of the utilities that the city owns and operates, as you know. We haven't had a rate increase in over 7 years, but we will be coming to you later this year with a proposed rate adjustment because we need it. It's been a long time, and costs are going up for us. So our budget consists of all these things, and I won't list all of them. They've been the same for many years. One thing I'll mention and I'll highlight is we do contribute over $6 million a year in the in lieu franchise fee that goes to support police and fire and parks and libraries. And that's one of the dividends that the city has for owning its own electric utility. So it's a great resource for the city. And it's one of the reasons why all of those services I just listed are of very high quality. We also operate all the streetlights in town. So when somebody calls in about a streetlight that's out, it's our staff that goes out and replaces the streetlights. We also fund Public Works traffic signals with electric rates in Roseville. And we also share the utility billing and utility exploration center costs with EU. Then, as Rich mentioned, we do support all of the city shared services. So we have a lot more numbers than Rich did. So our total revenue budget for fiscal 22 is $156 million. It's pretty flat from what the budget in 21 was. You'll see for 21, we're expecting a little bit more. It's because of the pandemic. People have been using more electricity, especially at home, working from home. Our operating expenses are very flat at $148 million compared to $145 million in the budget last year. Costs are relatively flat. The bulk of our costs are energy costs. And energy costs, we've been able to keep them relatively flat, partly because of our risk management policies by entering into contracts for long-term periods that lets us fix the price of energy for Roseville. Our capital revenue is the money we receive from developers to pay for new service development, and then our capital expenditures includes both new development as well as our own capital improvement program, and you saw a presentation on all the city's capital improvement projects last meeting. So overall, our net annual cash flow for the proposed fiscal 2022 budget is about $2 million. I would expect that to degrade a bit given the drought. We rely on hydropower, and we're not going to get quite a bit of hydropower, so we still have to pay for it, but we have to replace it. So it's a double-edged sword for us. These are just some of our financial metrics that we measure our performance by, as well as our rating agencies measure. Days cash on hand is how much cash we have on hand, and we have a very strong reserves. Our debt service coverage ratio is how much money we have left to pay our bonds to our bondholders, and then our rate stabilization fund is available for us to use in an emergency or in cases where we want to stabilize rates, and we have not used that in a number of years.
I'm sorry, how long?
A number of years. No, it's been probably 10, I would say. Okay. So we're very strong financially. We got through the pandemic much stronger than many utilities, and a lot of that has to do with the planning and the reserves that we had. It also has to do with people have been using more electricity, but we also have very smart purchase power protocol and policies that has not left us subject to price volatility in the energy markets. We paid off $35 million in debt early this past year because we had the reserves to do that, so we'll save money for the foreseeable future on our debt service. And both Standard & Poor's and Fitch have rated us AA, which is an extraordinary rating for a utility of our size in a city of our size, and it's due to the strong financial policies that the council has established and that we've adhered to all these years. Lots of key trends and issues, and some of them are similar to what you heard with EU. Lots of state and federal regulatory uncertainty. We have new regulations that we're constantly having to comply with and deal with, and they're not costing us as much as EU with some of their requirements, but it's getting very, very expensive. We have the utility service disconnection moratorium. We are looking to start back up with that, working with our customers. Towards the beginning of summer, we submitted a general information memorandum to you all, and we'll have many more conversations. We are talking to lots of customers. We're getting a lot more customers on payment plans. We got one today from a resident who had a $4,000 bill. They hadn't paid their bill in over a year, and so they will be paying that back over the course of a year or more. We just need people to pay something. We also are working within the state regulations on carbon reduction and renewable energy. It's getting harder and harder to find energy, especially during the evening. We had an outage tonight I was dealing with that all while at the beginning of the meeting. And it's between 4 and 9 p.m. is when people use the most electricity, and that is not when solar and wind are available. So there's a real challenge in the state, as we saw last summer and last fall, with providing energy in those hours. And so we really are working hard to work within those rules and regulations that the state has mandated. Rich mentioned recruitment and retention. That is something that we have been focused on heavily with our human resources folks as well as my staff. We have been reaching out to various colleges and universities and high schools and even to the junior high level, getting people to learn about our jobs and what we do and what great opportunities there are. We're also starting up new apprentice programs for substation technicians and metering technicians. We've never had that before. We've only had that for our line crews. So we're really excited about that, and those should start up either late this year or early next year. Extreme weather events, we've all been experiencing them. We're experiencing them now. They're going to become more frequent and more extreme, and it puts a lot of pressure and stress on our electric system and the states in the western United States electric system as well as the rest of the country. So that's something that we are working with in trying to fortify and strengthen our system. There's a new topic that's not new to a lot of folks, but it's new to us, and it's called environmental, social, and governance strategy. A lot of companies are looking at other companies and looking at investing in businesses and agencies that have environmental, social, and government strategies that align with theirs. And this is important for us because of our bonds. So the people who are investing in our bonds are looking at this. The rating agencies are rating us now based upon these things. And the good news is we're in good shape in Roseville. We've done a lot in these areas, and we will continue to focus on that. And then you've heard from Dennis on our PERS and OPEB liability numbers, and so I won't talk any more about that. And that is it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councilmember Alford, or start on this side and work our way down.
Yeah, I know the one thing that stood out in the report was the days cash on hand. It went from greater than 250 days up to 452 days, which is a pretty big increase for cash on hand. And so is that for a bond rating, or what was the purpose of that?
That actually compared what our goal is to what, I believe it was from what our goal is to where we are today. So I don't think it was an increase in 1 year.
So it wasn't a change, it was?
It has been going up. It has been going up.
All right, thank you.
On recruitment and retention, when we took a tour of the system back, I guess, in 2019, you mentioned that retaining linemen was a challenge because of the demand that the state's putting on PG&E to get trees. Is that still the case?
We have, the last 2 years, we've done a good job of keeping our line technicians. We grow our own. That's what we say. So we have an apprentice program. We're very selective about who we select and the criteria, and we make sure that they're a good fit for us, that they're going to want to work with us and we're going to work with them. So the folks that want to make a lot of money will go to PG&E because they can work tons of overtime and work 7 days a week in some cases, and they get hiring bonuses, they get retention bonuses. We don't have those. So we're looking for people who want more of a work-life balance and who fit in with our culture. And my staff has done a phenomenal job of that. And the folks we've been able to hire, we have an apprentice program right now going on, great group of technicians.
That's comforting to hear, because it's almost like they're blue chip athletes, right? Getting these signing bonuses
so
and things like that.
My team has worked so hard. It's amazing what they've been able to do and who they've been able to hire.
I'm not sure, and this might be a Sean Bigley you question, but do they stop doing bypass flows at Shasta?
I don't believe so. They were supposed to go, they were thinking through the end of May, and then they thought maybe mid-May, but I didn't hear that they haven't. No, we have.
So
my buddy at the Bureau.
They're bypassing the hydro plant to take to preserve the cold water for the fish in the river.
Yeah.
So that's where we're losing money, right?
We're losing power. Yeah, we still have to. We still pay what we pay, but we're not getting the power that we're paying for.
Do we pick that up at Calistoga, or through other aspects of the portfolio?
No, there's not other hydro available right now, so we pick it up on the market. We have to buy on the market, so we're not buying hydropower necessarily. as a point of information, they think that what they did with the bypass worked a bit, so on the temperature control.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendoza or Councilmember Rakucci?
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, you meant, and Bruce just said it, we're not using hydro because we don't have the water. You can't make the power. But we're still able to use our gas turbines so that can make a blend. And just like you said, wind and electricity our wind and solar aren't available all the time, especially in the dark.
Well, they're not available when our systems are peaking.
Yeah.
Throughout the state, yeah. So it's challenging. As our power plants have been running quite a bit more the past month.
I'm just glad we happen to have that opportunity.
And that we've invested, and the council has authorized us to invest in improvements in those plants.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. In case you haven't met Scott Huber, he's a high school board member, so when you talk about apprenticeship and working with high school students, he's going to be your conduit there.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Great presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle.
We did public comment.
Thank you. Okay. I'll open it for public comment.
Happy the lights are on.
And no calls this evening. And is there anyone here tonight that would like to speak to this item? Okay. All right. We'll close public comment. Thank you for the reminder. All right. We'll move on to item 9.1, which is Community Development Block Grant, the 2021 Annual Action Plan and Substantial Amendment to the 2020-2024 Consolidation Plan. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. I'm Tricia Isom, Housing Manager in the Economic Development Department. And before you tonight is the 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan, as well as a proposed amendment to the 2020 Consolidated Plan. The City of Roseville, as you know, is a Community Development Block Grant entitlement jurisdiction and receives an annual allocation of CDBG funds from HUD to promote affordable housing and community development programs for low-income residents. The City of Roseville's 2021 CDBG award totaled $736,721. My pie chart isn't as entertaining as Rich's, but here it is. The CDBG award is broken down into different funding categories. There's a maximum of 20% that can be allocated for planning and administration, which pays for annual program management and administration of the individual CDBG grants. A maximum of 15% can go toward public services, which go toward programs like job training, food, and educational programs. The remainder of the funds must go toward public facility projects, which could include improvements to infrastructure, activities related to housing, and neighborhood improvements. In order to determine which applications were funded for 2021, staff convened a review panel that consisted of CDBG staff from the City of Roseville and City of West Sacramento, as well as some consultants. Requests for funding under the public services category totaled $127,000. 2 applications were determined to be ineligible under federal regulations. The panel approved the remaining 7 activities, which include AMI Housing's short-term rental and utility assistance program, Kids First no-cost therapy and case management services, St. Vincent de Paul's volunteer grocery delivery service, Seniors First Meals on Wheels, Stand Up Placer's crisis intervention for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, and the Gathering Inn's emergency overnight shelter, as well as the part-time mental health clinician also at the shelter. 2 public facilities projects are recommended for funding in 2021. The Royer Park Revitalization Project will address safety, accessibility, and necessary improvement of recreational amenities by removing barriers and creating an informal outdoor cafe-type seating area surrounding the Cook Shack building. These improvements are intended to better serve residents of the area. Remaining award funds are proposed to be allocated to the city's owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program, which assists low-income residents with energy-efficient and health and safety-related repairs and increases both the quality of life for the homeowners and the quality of housing stock in Roseville. The OOR program is also funded through the State Home Program, but has strict regulations on loans for homes placed in a trust. Adding the remaining CDBG funds to the OOR program avoids the issue we had last year, where a resident had to wait for about 9 months for CDBG program income to become available for her loan, which was actually over $70,000. Public comment was solicited for the 2020 Consolidated Plan, and affordable housing and response to COVID-19 were high priorities at that time. In order to allow CDBG funds to assist with the Royer Park Revitalization Project, a substantial amendment to the plan is necessary. The proposed amendment adds a priority goal specific to funding public facilities and improvements, and the addition of this goal would allow the city to use the CDBG funds for public facility or infrastructure improvements, as well as address removal of architectural barriers and any other improvements identified for special needs populations in the next 4 years. Staff recommends that City Council receive public comment on the 2021 Annual Action Plan and propose substantial amendment to the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan and adopt a resolution to approve them for submission to HUD. This concludes my presentation, and you can let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does council have any questions of Tricia? Okay, I will open it up to public comment and see if there's anyone else on the phone or if we have anyone here this evening that would like to make a comment on this. And I'm not seeing anyone here. Any other comments before we have a motion? Okay, we have a motion, please.
To adopt resolution number 21-193, approving the 2021 Annual Action Plan, approving the proposed amendments to the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan, and authorizing the city manager to execute necessary documents and certifications on behalf of the city of Roseville. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord. Yes. Councilmember Rakucci.
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Yes. Yes, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 9.2, proposed water, wastewater, and waste service utility rate adjustments and municipal code revisions for fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 22-23.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the council. Rich Plecker again. With me tonight is Janet Vargas, who's our Business Services Administrator, who she and I will kind of tag team on this presentation, and we'll try to get you through this information quickly to maximize our time for any questions that you might have. So with that, Janet.
Thank you, Rich. Good evening. I'm pleased to be here to present our information about our utility rates analysis and our proposed rate adjustments. So I'm going to start off with some detail about what our rate study entails, the internal, external causes for our rate adjustments, a review of the proposed rates and what that looks like for customers, review our operating financial plans, and finish with a discussion about common themes in our protest letters. You're going to hear quite a bit of things that Rich mentioned in his earlier presentation, so I thank you for your patience. To set the background, there's a number of laws and policies with which we must comply with when establishing our utility rates. So to go backwards, in California, setting water, wastewater, and solid waste rates at the time, it's subject to Proposition 218, which has been in place since 1996. It prohibits utilities from collecting revenue beyond what is necessary to provide service, and also requires that the revenue collected must be used to provide just those services. It prohibits customer classes from subsidizing one another. For example, the rates set for residential and commercial customers must cover just those specific services. Also, as Rich mentioned, the city charter requires that the utilities be financially self-sufficient, allows for saving and planning for ongoing expenses like rehabilitation, so that's a serious consideration in our rate study. Revenue requirements refer to the debt service for water and wastewater utilities. We pay debt, and therefore we need to maintain our good credit rating. So there needs to be sufficient amount of revenue collected annually to cover debt service. In 2015, Council approved our fiscal policies for EU, which included goals for each utility. The policies are to achieve and maintain our financial reserves that are equivalent to 75% in our water and wastewater utilities and equivalent to 50% in our waste services. City councils also required that rates be equitable, generate stable revenue, be simple to administer and understand, and be affordable. In addition, EU is specifically aligned with several of our city council priorities. Those include remaining fiscally responsible, in a changing world. We can support community engagement and advocacy. We enhance economic vitality, and we work very hard to deliver exceptional city services. And finally, EU is diligent and invests in very, very well-planned infrastructure and growth. So on this slide, you'll see that the rate study is a very comprehensive financial analysis, and some of the main drivers of the outcome of the rate study are these basic assumptions that we see on the slide. They are forecast over a 10-year period, and again, this analysis is done every other year, which provides us opportunities to adjust for accuracy and correct the revenues and expense trajectory on a relatively frequent basis. And a note about the growth assumption, one of the more frequently asked questions, and Rich talked about this one too, is that development pays for development. So our comment about growth pays for growth. Our ratepayers do not pay for any of the development that goes on out in our new community areas. The growth that we show on our chart here is very conservative, and that's 1% growth to our base rate or base. Regarding salaries, which is another big frequently asked question, the utility rate setting process is not the vehicle by which pay raises are established. The rate model assumes salary adjustments for future years to align with different bargaining groups. On this next slide, there's a number of things that are increasing expenses. So one is technology upgrades. So in conjunction with Roseville Electric, the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project will provide benefits in the form of smart water meters. This project will include a customer-facing interface, improving ratepayers' experience in controlling their monthly bills. It'll give them very quick access to their data. We are looking at contributing about $2 to $2.5 million in the next 2 years. Another factor is increased contributions for upcoming rehabilitation and replacement projects for water and wastewater. And as Rich said, in water alone, we're putting in roughly about $10 million per year. And then the other thing that he spoke about, it's funny how we had some of the same things on our slides. Our customer service satisfaction rate is 98%, and we work very, very hard to maintain that. There, as I mentioned previously, there are some labor costs assumed in our model for staffing changes and succession planning, as Rich talked about. And finally, one of the largest factors that influence costs is the unfunded state mandates. As always, these come with significant price tags. EU is a very active government advocacy program to help push back on these expensive legislations that unfortunately ultimately get passed on to our ratepayers. We are one of a few local advocacy programs, and we take this effort very seriously. We'll talk more about some of those things on the next slide. So this talks about our unfunded mandates and our operational impacts. So some of these significant costs that are consistently increasing are regulation and unfunded state mandates. All of these utilities are heavily regulated, and in fact, about 25 to 30% of our expenses are tied to regulatory costs in one form or another, whether that be training, safety compliance, testing, monitoring, or sometimes inspections. So the big one that we've talked about this evening is SB 1383, which is waste services. It's the organic bill to divert organic waste out of the landfill, and it's also requiring more trucks, drivers, and new containers to comply with these mandates. Also included in our rate case is a 20% increase in tipping fees at the MRF. On the wastewater side, the state board has been concerned about salt buildup in the Central Valley's groundwater for several years, and they recently issued orders for utilities to participate in a program to study, develop, and implement solutions to reduce the salt buildup. Our groundwater here in Roseville is not experiencing these salt problems, but because we are adjacent to other areas that are having some problems, the state is requiring Roseville to participate in that program. And then the favorite one here, ELAP, the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, is requiring increased state reporting, testing, and paperwork protocols. So that necessitated us to hire a position that's dedicated to quality control and, unfortunately, a lot of paperwork. As for water, there are several mandates and operational efficiencies impacting operations. AB 1668 and SB 606 impose significant water usage targets at a City of Roseville level, as well as added requirements related to indoor and outdoor water usage, commercial water usage, meter calibration, and system leak standards, and other additional state reporting requirements. This will require staffing, programmatic augmentations, and an increase in customer outreach in order to meet compliance. The water utility has undertaken an updated condition assessment at the city's water distribution mains, as well as the city's water treatment plant that was effective, actually, 1971 for the plant. As a result, EU has planned for increased rehabilitation funding to maintain the water systems and the infrastructure. EU, in coordination with Public Works Department, began repairing and rehabilitating water infrastructure in Roseville's core neighborhoods. The current neighborhood being rehabilitated is Hillcrest, and when completed in 2021, they will move on to the Roseville Heights neighborhood and begin work there in 2022 and 2023. Regarding security and resiliency, the American Water Infrastructure Act, which was passed in 2018, requires the City of Roseville and the nation's water providers to update their emergency response plans and develop a risk and resiliency assessment. EU, along with the police department, worked with a professional consultant to develop a report with recommended resiliency and security investments to our water systems and infrastructure. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, across all utilities, we are seeing mandate impacts to staffing. In addition to water and waste services, increased staffing needs in wastewater are due to new equipment and processes at our Pleasant Grove treatment plant as part of its capacity expansion. Similarly, the growth in the western part of Roseville have added miles of sewer pipeline that must now start to be cared for. So when infrastructure is new, it generally doesn't require much attention for the first 5 to 10 years. However, a significant amount of pipeline in West Roseville is kind of reaching that age and will start to require some serious attention. So this is a slide that talks about our monthly utility bill impact. So current practice for environmental utilities is to conduct a rate study every other year and set rates for 2 fiscal years. This is in accordance with the desire of City Council to see smaller incremental rate increases, if needed, rather than significant rate hikes that would be more likely if rates were evaluated less frequently. This slide shows the impact to a typical Roseville residential customer. On a monthly basis, that customer uses approximately 1,400 cubic feet of water, has a flat wastewater rate, a single 90-gallon trash can, and a single 90-gallon green waste container. And as Rich talked about in the update, the proposed water rate is a 60-40 split of fixed and variable costs. In addition, recycled water rates are going to be adjusted to 60% of potable water rates in fiscal year 22 and up to 70% of potable water rates in fiscal year 23. Ultimately, our goal is to get recycled water to recover 100% of the fixed water base costs and 85% of the variable costs. Since EU implemented the Rate Stabilization Fund, we've been putting money aside on an annual basis. With the large cost increases anticipated in this rate analysis, it was determined that this would be a great financial merit in using some of those dollars to help offset some of these rate adjustments and prevent spikes to those adjustments. So as you can see in year 1, we're going to be using $250,000 in water, $2.25 million in wastewater in year 1, an additional $1 million in year 2, and then $3.5 million in waste services in year 1. So without that, you would see some of the bigger spikes that you can see at the bottom of the screen. So instead of the $8.28 per month increase using the rate stabilization funds, the increase would be $15.84 in the first year. The second year, we are anticipating $9.25, but not using rate stabilization funds, that would have been $4.30. So you can see the big spike that would have happened in that first year. The proposed changes would apply to the next 2 fiscal years. So in the first year, effective July 1, 2021, the increase would be $8.28 a year. And then in the second year, effective July 1, 2022, it would be $9.25 per year. What this equates to in a percentage, it's about 3% for water, about 6% for wastewater, and approximately 16% for waste services. And the big increase for waste services is just due to the organics mandate. The next slide. So this one, Scott, is for you.
Thank you.
It's for everybody, but primarily for you. So this one shows, in the green, it shows what our proposed rates would be. The blue is where our current rates are. And then if you notice the little asterisks there, those are jurisdictions that we have not gotten any information on what their rates would be for fiscal year 22. So even though we are not at the lowest, we're amongst the lowest, and in some cases we'll probably be the lowest, most likely in waste services when those increases go into place. But we're very, very well positioned in the region with our rates.
Can I ask a real quick question right there?
Certainly.
Some of those that are on that list don't have the future planning like we have. Is that they don't have, you know, how we build into the future? They don't build that into that.
Correct. Some of them, I know, Folsom, for example, for their water, they do not put aside a significant amount of rehabilitation money like we do.
That's impressive.
So these next three slides, you'll see three very, very similar slides. So this is water. This is our operating financial plan going into the next 5 years. So you can see expenses are the gray bar. The red line is our current revenue without any changes. And then the green line shows what our proposed revenue is. And this is for water. The next slide is wastewater. So you can see the same thing. Our gray bars are our proposed expenses. Red line is current. And then you'll see two green lines in this case because the dollar amount is significant enough that you can see it. The dotted green line is the proposed revenue without rate stabilization fund money, and the solid green line is with it. So with using the rate stabilization fund, we're staying right around the top of those expenses. And then the next slide shows our waste services. And again, the same situation there with our expenses in the gray bar. You can see the red line because of the significant changes that are happening in our costs. The red line is lower there. And then the $3.5 million with the solid green line versus the dotted line. So you can see how using the rate stabilization funds is a very good thing for our utility there. And then the next slide is one of these, did you know? We all know how good our water is in Roseville, but it's also pretty cheap when you compare it to a gallon bottle of water at the grocery store. Those cost about $1.29, whereas you can turn the spigot on and get a gallon of water for .0046, so less than half a penny for a gallon of water. And then this next slide, I'm going to hand this over to Rich here. So this is talking about our themes that we got in our protest letters. Just so you know, we received 8 protest letters out of about 44,000 that were sent out. And this represents 0.02% of the entirety. And as I said, we got 8 letters, and these are some of the themes that we found that were pretty consistent.
Thank you, Janet. I want to touch on these a little bit because these are themes that we kind of hear throughout the rate process, and we didn't really talk a lot about that this year. It's our constant practice. We spend the better part of a year developing a rate case and then going out and discussing it with our larger customers, the Chamber of Commerce, Arcona, a number of different groups. Sun City, they're always a fun one, just because they're such an active community and pay attention to these things. So we didn't really talk about a lot of that, but these are themes that we hear, and some of them we hear reflected in the protest letters. It's important for me to point out here that Proposition 218 that we talked about earlier is not just a state law. This is a constitutional amendment. And so the process is that in order to not enact or for the citizens to prevent a rate proposal from coming forward, you have to achieve 50% plus one of the number of customers you have. So in other words, you would need somewhere in the 23,000 protest letters. But what we want to convey is that we're listening to people. We don't like to do this. We've said this before. Raising rates are our least favorite things to do, and especially this year. And I'll just be honest with you, we're facing some large increases in solid waste that I personally struggle with a little bit. We're adding a great deal of cost. We're adding a great deal of complexity to our operation that I don't think is really going to achieve the desired objectives. And that's just being candid with y'all. And we've expressed that to the public who showed up. I've said it tongue in cheek. We're going to spend tens of millions of dollars a year in the future to get the banana peels and coffee grounds out of the landfill. It's just, you got to think about these things in scale. But nevertheless, here's sort of the major themes that we've heard. A couple of people said, the economy, in light of COVID, the way things are right now, it's really not a good time. We happen to agree with that. We couldn't agree more. But we also understand that when you put these things off, just like home improvements, things tend to get worse. It's usually better when you know that something's coming up to shoulder into it and move forward. So that's our recommendation. Again, a comment about growth. People do seem to be confused. EU is not paying for the growth in West Roseville. We don't pay for growth infrastructure. Actually, the growth in number of customer accounts helps existing customers. It creates a larger base upon which we can spread costs. So quite frankly, the actual growth in West Roseville helps our utility rates right at the moment. In years down the road, we'll have to pay for the additional maintenance of all of that, but it actually helps us. Again, sales and property tax revenue, another confusion. The statement was, why don't you use sales tax or property tax? Because those are reserved for general fund purposes. Utility funds are used to pay for utilities. That's by the city charter and by your policy. Inflation comment is that people recognize that a lot of times their paychecks don't reflect the same level of change as the utilities or the proposals. We agree with that as well. We happen to compete in multi-sectors in the utilities, some of which are water, wastewater industry. Actually, solid waste competes in the transportation sector. The transportation sector, last time I checked, had a CPI increase of about 8%. So we face a wide disparity of cost ranges and external economic pressures. And if you think about it, Amazon, delivery trucks, all of those kinds of things right now, the cost of that's going way high. So we can't just set it at inflation and call it necessarily good. We try to beat that if we can. One comment was about flat rates for wastewater and waste services, given I think the circumstance was a relatively small home and a single individual, and our rates don't reflect large changes for solid waste and wastewater. And that's true, because the reality is that the actual cost of providing utility services is getting the people in the trucks and having the program to deal with it. The actual volume that's contained in the can or the volume of wastewater, with some distinction, it really isn't a significant part of the total overall cost. That's why when we do rates, we look at certain customer segments. And we've heard this in previous rate cases where they're building smaller type homes out west that feel that they should have a smaller solid waste rate. The truth is it actually costs us more money to service those properties because of the geometry of the driveways and the closeness of the properties. So we try to do our best. It's an imperfect science, but just a little bit more insight into that particular comment. Then the last one was there seemed to be some sense that the Prop 218 notice was confusing. There must be something to do with this IB consulting independency. So let me start with this. The Prop 218 notice that we send out is actually a legally required document. If we had our way, we could probably say everything we needed to say in about a page, just to tell people what we're up to, what the impacts are. But as these things are, Prop 218 has been around since '96. It's been litigated a number of times. And through the process of litigation, you get legally acceptable forms, and that which we sent out to everyone in Roseville, myself included, Janet, everybody else. It's this gargantuan looking thing that's very difficult to understand for me personally, but that's actually what's required. So that's why the importance, why we basically beg people to come talk to us. We can give you the plain and simple truth of all of that. With respect to IB Consulting, that's an independent consultant. We have them double check our work. They do a cost of service analysis. Again, this is to meet the legal requirements of the rate setting process. We don't want to have any errors. We don't want to have anything that can jeopardize our revenue stability for the utilities. So that's why we go to that effort to do that. They're not telling us what we want them to tell. We set them, it's an independent scope, good, bad, or indifferent. We want to hear from them on a professional basis. So the last comment we heard was, and we get this one, actually we got this one less this year than we have in the past, and that's, I'm on a fixed income, I'm elderly, I have ADA issues, I'm a retired veteran, things of that nature. Please don't raise my rates. I'm on a fixed income. And our comment to that is that, again, Proposition 218 actually prohibits us from doing that. That strict cost of service by class means that we cannot subsidize one group's rates with additional charges from another, which is what we would have to do. We just can't do it. Now, I would go so far to say as if we could do it, if we would certainly want to, if we could, we just simply can't. It's long been one of our goals is to have a source of additional external revenue that we could perhaps use that to help with some rate assistance. And electric's a little bit different than this. They have a little bit of a different flexibility than we do. But when it comes to water and wastewater and solid waste, we have to strictly do it that way. But we'll do everything possible with people to help them control their bills. We feel for them, but we just can't. It's illegal for us to do it. So I wanted to share that with you. On the next slide, kind of contains our recommendations, and then Janet and I'll be available to answer any questions you have and from the public. And that's, we're requesting council introduce for first reading the ordinance, the Roseville Municipal section dealing with water, wastewater rates, and some minor edits for clarity. One is that in the proposed ordinance contained in the bundle we saw along, we need to edit a reference to one section versus another, make a slight edit to it. But just want to get that into the record that there's a slight edit there. With that, both Janet and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Excellent, thank you. Does the council have any questions for our team?
Yeah. How much are, and we can do this offline, for the salinity plan? Do we know what we're paying?
I think the last I recall is just under $1 million. So the full...
I'm sorry.
Just under $1 million.
For the CV salts?
Correct.
Basin plan amendment? Correct. For the 10-year period?
For our contribution to it. So remember what Janet said, we don't actually have this problem, but the state decided that it was good that all hands on deck, everybody needs to pay into it.
I'm fully aware of it. I'm dealing with it in my day job.
Yeah, it's not a small number.
If we're injecting into the groundwater basin, and I think of Woodland Davis, and they're injecting 200 EC into the groundwater basin, they're improving the groundwater basin. I'm not going to take up, the hour's late. Let's talk about this.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
I'm just glad that we have the rehabilitation funds that we can use to help soften it a little bit. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but you went over all the regulations that we need to comply with to keep even our MRF and our facility open. If we don't comply, we don't have a place to take care of our waste, and we'd be in a whale of hurt, much more cost. So doing it this way just makes a better sense for our community.
Thank you. All right, we'll open it up to public comment. We have one call.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Yes, my name is Paul Griffin, and I just wanted to thank the presenters. The way they handled that presentation was excellent, and I really appreciated the acknowledgement of the protest letters. Mine was one of them, and many of the items that were brought up were discussed thoroughly. Thank you so much for that. Excellent. I did want to ask a couple of questions, though, and then also something for maybe future planning to think about. I have a question on the federal funding, the WIFA. That part of that was for water reliability efforts, and some of the cost increases were also discussed as being utilized for water reliability. The other thing is the upgrades to the water meters. I live in the older part of town, District 2, which is downtown central Roseville. And I think I speak for myself and also those residents here and in East Roseville that, the upgrades to the water meters is probably going to happen with the newer areas of town being, I'm sorry to say it, West Roseville. And I'd like to get some comment on that, on what the plan is to replace the current water meters before or after current and future construction. And then the rehab, there was an item in the presentation that talked about rehabilitation of areas of town. Now, I do know that Hillcrest and downtown are a couple of areas slated for fiscal year 22 and through 24 to be rehabbed, and that's for maintenance. But I also heard discussion that West Roseville already needs to have rehabilitation and maintenance done on infrastructure. Going back to that federal WIFA funding, it seems like that would be a reliability effort that could cover or at least offset both of those areas or projects in the next year or so. Lastly, a question about the organic recycling. I assume that means organic, such as like was discussed, the banana peels and the green waste. Has there been any discussion on utilizing that specifically for parks, rec areas, and also for street medians and so forth, and actually stockpiling that in the city somewhere so that we're not paying to dispose of it and then paying to obtain it to maintain our city? I think that might help with beautification efforts. So, again, thanks so much. Lastly, I did want to bring up, on the IB Consulting study, projected revenues, Table 19 on page 18 and Table 20 on page 19. There's a $10 million difference per year between revenue and expenses. $10 million for 21, 10 for 22, 23, and so forth. When you look over a course of 5 years, that's $50 million difference between projected revenues and expenses. So I want to know where that $50 million is going to go, specifically over the next 2 years affected by this rate increase being $20 million. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We have one more call.
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Herman Williams, District 5.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment on the process, the 218 process. If you approve this tonight as council, we will not get 60,000 voters to say nay. So this is a critical moment for the council to make a big decision. What I want to point out is since 2018, the rates for the city utilities have gone up, if this goes through 2022, up about 25%. Now, that's not a lot. It's $20 a month for every ratepayer, and or I should say consumer. I'm sorry. We don't like to be called ratepayers anymore. But over a year, that's $240. And for the 10% of Roseville residents that live below the poverty level, that's a month's worth of groceries. So that I want to put on there. Also, if you look back, since they did the last rate increase from 2017 to 2020, they have banked $66 million. They went from $154 million in unrestricted cash to 2020. It'll be $221 million for the environmental utilities unrestricted cash. That's an increase of 43% over that period. And I'm predicting, just looking as a CPA, that they'll be at $242 million at the end of this fiscal year. And the last thing I want to also point out, they're identifying capital needs, but over that same time period, the only increase we've seen in capital outlay has been about 8.5%. So the numbers don't match up. I just recommend that you look at those numbers before making a decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other calls tonight? Okay. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll public comment. Does Steph want to respond to any of the comments?
Sure, I can try some of them. Some of them we might have to handle offline as well. Some of the more detailed financial ones we'd have to sort of stare at the sheets. So a comment was made about WIFIA funding and water reliability. Could we fund some of our water reliability out of that? Remember, WIFIA is a funding source. It's a source of a loan, and it's got very defined projects associated with it. Those are not the only water reliability projects that we're engaged in. We have other SMUD transfers. We have other projects with PCWA, intertype projects. So it's designed to fund only that small subset of those reliability funds. So hopefully we portrayed that correctly. It's just a piece of what we're doing. The meter retrofit, I think the caller said that he suspects that we're going to start with meter retrofit on the west side of town versus the east. That's exact opposite. Where the older meters are going to, get changed out first. But more specifically, because of the state laws, we have to do some things on the meter testing protocols to make sure that they're maintaining accuracy. But it's intuitive to think that as we go along some of the more established neighborhoods in Roseville, as we rehab those mains and the fire hydrants and do all the upgrades, we're going to replace the meters at the same time. So it should be exactly opposite of what he thought. The west meters are virtually brand new. There's no reason to replace those. So hopefully that answers that question. Rehab different areas of town. The comment was that on the west side, rehab, no, when we're talking about rehab, we're talking about major rehab. We're digging up pipelines, replacing them or lining them. We're not anticipating the need to do that on the west side of town for quite some time. What Janet spoke to earlier was just things like routine maintenance, removing tree roots, things of that nature. For the first 10 years you build a subdivision, there's no trees out there, so there's no trees to get in the sewers. But once trees, and I'm just picking on trees here, once trees take root and they grab a hold, they go after your sewers like crazy, and then, eventually you'll get there. So again, it's not an apples to apples comparison. On the organics, the comment there about can we do something with the organics actually, as luck would have it, the regulation will require the city to purchase this organic mulch in volumes that we're not quite sure what they are yet, but suffice it to say that the city will have more organic mulch available to it than it will know what to do with, because that's actually part of the law as well. We hope to be able to receive some offsets and credits through some of our operations in the wastewater plant. We'll see some years down the road what that is, but there's going to be an awful lot of compost available, and it would be our intent to make that, after we satisfy the city's needs, if there's more left, come get it, have at it. So that's about all the notes that I took. The rest of them were pretty detailed. I think Janet will follow up on those in detail with respect to fund summaries. So hopefully that answers your questions as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I close public comment. Okay, checking. We want to... Sorry, we'll have clerk read the motion.
Okay. The proposed motion is to approve rate adjustments effective July 1st, 2021 and July 1st, 2022 for water, wastewater, and waste service utility rates and associated amendments to the Roseville Municipal Code. Introduced for first reading ordinance of the Council of the City of Roseville amending sections 912, 100 of Chapter 912 of Title 9 regarding garbage, and amending sections 1408, 90 and 1408, 100 of Chapter 14.8, amending sections 1416, 200, 1416, 201, and 1416, 220 of Chapter 14.6, and of Title 14 of the Roseville Municipal Code regarding public utility fees, charges, and rates as amended by the slide.
So moved.
Mayor, do we have to get any response back? I'm just legally, we had those questions. Can we go forward like this and then get additional information back? How do we deal with that? Or is it okay?
It was part of public comment, correct?
Before we...
I think Rich did address most or the majority of the comments.
So,
if the council needs any further information, I would suggest asking staff what it is that you need.
I'm fine with it. I just wanted to make sure that was that one question that was looking about costs or
Yep.
something.
And Councilmember Alvord has a question, so I think once we get a first and a second, I'll call for any further clarification.
Okay.
We have a first by Councilmember or Vice Mayor Hattishelt. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Alvord, do you have?
Sorry. Rich, I want to ask, I think this is an important question to ask for the community. If we say no, we don't want to do this rate increase, what do we do? Because the law says it has to cover our costs. So can you explain, I mean, it's a lot of money. What would the result be if we say no?
Sure. That's a good question, and I'll answer both questions. Scott's first, and then the one that Councilmember Rikichi posed. So in any rate-setting exercise, it's never a perfect process, and so that's why we start sort of in advance like we do. It's a question of trade-offs. We don't like asking for additional money. We first ask ourselves, how do we conserve money? How do we trim costs? Can we absorb this? Lately, we've not been able to been real successful with that, quite honestly. I mean, the costs have been growing. But in any number of things, it's important to realize that in our rate-setting process, we use a 10-year forecast. So the rates that you're approving or considering approving tonight actually don't have much to do with this fiscal year. It's based on what's happening in that sort of fiscal trajectory over the next 10 years. So first answer to your question is, if you didn't approve it now, would we see an immediate change next year? And probably not. You probably wouldn't really see it. What you would start to see, though, however, is we would start to adjust funding levels, and these are all based on choices, of course, but you'd see alterations. Maybe we would stop sticking money into our reserves to meet our reserve requirements. Of course, that violates an existing council policy. We could stop contributing to rehabilitation or throttle down rehabilitation, where that wouldn't really violate a policy, but it would leave our cash insufficient to handle the identified rehabilitation that we have over the next 30 years, which that's what all those numbers are based on. We don't just make that up, but we look at 30 years in advance, we roll that down into a number of what we need to be investing in any given year to get the job done. Sort of like the paint the Golden Gate Bridge scenario. In order to get the Golden Gate Bridge painted, you have to get started. So that's the way that works. Again, you probably wouldn't necessarily see it immediately. The other tactic you could do, and this is one of the things that makes Roseville very unique in my experience, again, 35 years. I've never seen a city that self-funds rehabilitation in cash out of pay-as-you-go revenues. That's really a testament, I think, to our fiscal strength and the length of time that we've been doing this. The analogy to this is sort of like as a homeowner, you would never have to take out a loan or a second to do a remodel. That you've adequately anticipated that over a period of time, and you've salted away enough money in any given month or year so that you know that when it comes time to remodel the kitchen, you have the funds that are available. You could certainly go get a home loan to do that. We've chosen, because of where we're at, we don't really like debt because it's expensive and it's time consuming in terms of dealing with the requirements. Our general rule is we look at it, I'll use my words and then Janet needs to correct me, she can, she's actually the finance professional. If we exchange $10 million a year in rehabilitation funding and said we're going to debt finance that $10 million a year will turn into $20 million a year in the fullness of time with interest payments, fees, all that stuff. So I wouldn't recommend that we give up that position that we really fought hard for. Now, operationally, there's things where we could trim back. We could cut down on some of the convenience activities, things that kind of we do, though maybe we don't have to do, but we like doing. We could cut back on big truck summers. So we could cut down on some of the events. We could cut down on some of those things. Trim revenues. We could hold staff positions constant. There's really no getting out of complying with the regulations. We're going to have to address that. We're going to have to do it. So there's not a lot of options there. But there are some things that we could choose not to do. We could be very deliberate about it. We could erode our financial position. We could erode our customer satisfaction standing. Again, I wouldn't recommend that. In the balance of the rate proposal, that reflects all of those gives and takes in all of that. But again, I've said this before, our job is to bring forward the best recommendation we can on balance for the community. The council is the decision maker. You can approve it, you can deny it, you can approve something less than what's stated. It's at your discretion. So hopefully I answered that question adequately. To Pauline's earlier question, under public comment, I don't think we have to, answer every single question, especially some of the technical questions. But as Bob said earlier, we will contact the customer offline and go through it and answer any questions because we want to know. I think I got most of the substance, but some of the financial transactions, I think we might have to look at the same lines and compare notes. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well,
so I wanted to add, thank you for answering that. You mentioned earlier there's a piece about economic vitality, and I just want to mention the chart where we compared to other jurisdictions. Some of them had huge rate increases, and I think that it's important for our community to understand we're still really, really low, and we don't have. I mean, they look big compared to Roseville, but compared to everybody else's operations, we're doing it right. The economic vitality is really big. Not only are our residents loving the quality of our services and the comparative pricing, but the businesses, this is huge for the business economy, and the businesses are our future revenue generators. That's a big long-term play for the city. And we bring businesses here just because of our utilities. Not just, but that's a big factor. I mean, it costs them so much less to operate here in the city of Roseville. And then the other comment is all of us are married and we all have to answer to our spouses and we have to pay these rates too. And so I know when we met, I asked serious questions. Those are important things. And I think we all, our community's asking us, our own families asking us. And I appreciate you guys being patient with us as we ask you some hard questions in those meetings. And then the last thing, council hasn't had increases in decades as far as the $7,200 we get paid a year, and this does not affect us. I saw several social media, they just want to raise their own, whatever. This has nothing to do with us. It doesn't come to us, and we have to pay just like everybody else. So, thanks.
If I might, Madam Mayor, the one thing I didn't hear in your answer is the liability. If we don't do something, there may be costs, there may be liability, penalties and fines. So it may cost us more to not do something.
I'm sorry, I wasn't suggesting that we violate a regulatory. I was thinking that we could do other things first, but eventually it would lead to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if I wasn't complete, let me.
No, I wasn't criticizing you. I
No,
was just
it's
emphasizing. And then, as with any budget cycle, it's a professional forecast and prognosis. Things can intervene, unintended consequences. There can be savings during that period of time that show up the next budget cycle.
Right.
So to the gentleman who was very diligent, a CPA, right? If we find something, we adjust it, right? If we don't, we're not the federal government where we say, okay, that's our budget number, and if we don't spend it, we don't get it the next cycle, right?
No, let me be clear on that, because it's common for us to over-realize, like we did last year. We over-realized revenues, and the other thing that we did at the start of the pandemic is we cut spending, discretionary spending, big time. So we had a bubble. Well, that bubble went straight into the savings account, and that's helping this rate case right now. So we don't take it as authority to go expand the program or do whatever we need to do. It's just our best estimate of what it's going to take to conduct business. And if we get lucky, like you say, it goes straight in the savings account first. And then next go around, we don't have to ask. And I would love to do that.
Apologize, Mayor, for emphasizing this, but you could not have predicted the drought that's happening right now, that's reducing water use and revenue to the city. You couldn't. It's just one of those things that, your best prognosis, Anyway, thank you, Madam.
Okay, so we have a first and a second.
I'm going to call the question.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Haddishelt? Councilmember Albert? Councilmember Cucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that information and what you do. Okay, that just about finishes up for our agenda. We'll move into Actually, I'll do one last public comment and see if anyone has called in. I'm assuming, just seeing staff here, that there's no one here that wants to address the council. Do we have any phone calls this evening? Okay. All right, I'll close public comment. Before we start with our city manager and our comment, I know that we had all heard the news this week or late last week about the passing of former Mayor June Wanish, Roseville's first female mayor, who most of us all had an opportunity to get to know and love and appreciate the work that she did. So if my fellow council members wanted to comment on that too, I think that would be fitting. I know her family's trying to coordinate a memorial or celebration of life sometime in June in the town square once they can get family in place, and our gatherings will permit that. So with that said, I'll kick it over to you. City manager, any other comments?
No further staff reports, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alvord?
I got to meet June several years ago, and I've been in touch with her. We chat occasionally on social media, and she's been to some campaign things. And I am so impressed with the service that she has given our city and the legacy that she has left behind as far as ethics go and the ability to get along with people and get things done. And I heard some of the stories of what it was like to be the first female mayor, and it wasn't easy. And so I just, we've lost a great one, and she left a really good legacy, and I was proud to get to know her. And as far as comments, we listened to some speakers this evening talk about the rainbow flag, and I know all of the council members, we've received a lot of emails and phone calls and some letters from people in the community talking on that topic. And because it's not on our agenda, that's not anything we can actually vote on or decide tonight, because it needs to be on our agenda. But I'd like to make a few comments of my own. I attended a CORE meeting, a Coalition Roseville Youth meeting last week, and the discussion was on suicide and depression. And it was a very interesting conversation about some of the challenges in the county around this. And I think all of us have neighbors, for sure, that are in the LGBTQ community. Most of us, if not all of us, have family members at some level that are in that community. This group of individuals spans parties. It spans races, age groups. It's a pretty big part of our population, and it's just kind of intertwined in religions. I mean, it's pretty big. Yet as a community, we still have an extremely high incident of suicide and depression in this community because of their experiences of acceptance. We have a set of trees in this county that are well known for people hanging themselves on. We have a bridge in our county that a lot of young people jump off of. Sorry. And a lot of the victims are young. And what's sad about it is they feel like society doesn't accept them. They have no hope, and it breaks my heart. I've never said this in public before, so I want to get through this here. So one of my 7 children was raised just like the other 6. He attended Christian schools his whole life. He chose to go to a Christian college. He was never molested, never promiscuous, never traumatized as a child. When he was young, we tried to get him to eat with his right hand, and he kept switching over to the left hand. He tried very hard to be right-handed. He tried to write and do sports right-handed, but he was way better left. He was just wired that way as a left-hander. After he graduated from college with a perfect 4.0 GPA, he very nervously told his family that he was gay. And he realized it back when he was a junior in high school. And as we thought back, we remembered that those last couple of years of high school and his first year of college, he went through a lot of depression, and we weren't understanding it. And it came together and made quite a bit of sense. And we didn't know what he was wrestling with. We had no idea. And we didn't know how easily We could have lost him. But luckily, he figured it out, and we're so proud of him that he got through that, and right now he's thriving. And he gave me permission to be able to say this tonight. And a few years ago, he probably would not have, but he's gotten to the point where he knows who he is now. And I'm telling you, he was just wired that way. I believe it's really important that we as a council don't allow our flagpole to be a semi-public forum. We had a caller that was very passionate about every kind of flag's going to want to go up there. And I think we need to actually have a policy to where we can control that and we don't end up with every kind of flag. We don't need our flagpole to be a speaking platform for organizations. But there are some things that, like the rainbow flag, that's a totally different kind of a story for our community. It's an acceptance. It's something that can help possibly prevent some suicides. I'd like to ask the council if they would consider actually helping create a real policy, because we don't have one right now. We need to set up a policy. I think we need to set a policy so that our flagpole is an expression of government speech if we as a council choose to do that. And only city council can propose that we approve flying the flag or any non-government flag. And I think it would be an appropriate policy that's very, very common in cities throughout our nation. So I was wondering if I could get council support to have staff bring us options for a flag policy so we can actually have one.
Does the council have thoughts on that?
I think the idea of having have said direction for a flag policy is wise, and we decide on what we want to do. We want to continue the way we're doing it.
Just for clarification, so my understanding is, in the absence of the current policy, the city of Roseville, they're adopting the government code, right? As far as the flags that fly on city property?
Yes, we have a practice really for decades, and that is to follow the government code where we fly the U.S. and the state flag, and that is all.
So is that a practice, or is it actually labeled a policy?
There's no formal policy. There's no written policy.
So our policy, and I put those in air quotes, would be see the government code, and whatever that reads, that's what we're following at this point.
This will depend on the direction of the council. So will it be a formal policy is always a good idea. But will the formal policy say that we are to maintain essentially the status quo, which is flying the legally required flags? Or will the policy contain some discretion for the council to choose some other kinds of flags that contain other symbols to fly those? And so if that's the intent of the council to allow for other types of flags, we definitely want to have a policy, because if we,
That's
in the absence of...
council approved, not
Right,
not
has
public.
to be council approved, because in the absence of a policy, then there's the slippery slope problem where we may get, the KKK, the extreme example of wanting to fly a flag, and then if we prohibit that, we may end up in trouble. So that's where a policy is very valuable. But whether it is restricted to match the current practice or to allow for additional flags, that depends on council direction.
I obviously can't speak for my colleagues here, so it would be at council direction, but I just wanted to make sure our viewers at home and, well, I guess staff in the audience probably already knows, there's nobody left here, but that we just don't have the absence of any guidance at all. We're just deferring to the government. So I don't want people leaving thinking, well, there's nothing, so we're basically recreating the wheel. We have something, but to Councilmember Albert's point, we should probably drill down and make that more of a specific granular policy, whatever that may or may not look like, with all of our input. Is that where you were going?
Well, yes, I would like us to have a policy where I think council makes the decision, and it'll pull the community. It'll make it not a quasi-public forum situation, which could happen.
I just want to be real clear, because is that going to be an option of, like you said, right now we have a practice, not a formal policy. I'm happy with our practice. And for me, I would, if that means that we send staff back to look at that, I want one of those options, and it'd be an option that I was interested, would be to keep our practice in a formal policy. Keep it the way it is now, but make it in a solid policy.
And
I just
you're,
want to make sure I'm, saying it right.
well, and I think what I'm hearing is the first step is staff should go look at other jurisdictions.
Oh, yes, and we've already done that. We'll continue doing that, and,
Right.
and absolutely, we'd
And then,
be fully prepared.
and then bring to the council what other jurisdictions do.
We can bring back options. We can bring back essentially two policies. One is which proposes to embed the status quo, which is what we've been doing. There could be an alternate for the council to choose from, that an alternate policy which would allow for other types of flags. And then the council can, at that meeting, make a decision. And I remind, this topic is not agendized, so we don't want to get too deep in it, Brown Act-wise, but we can have a more fuller discussion at a agendized meeting.
And the point that I think would be important to think about is when the policy comes, it does not, whether you're for or against a rainbow flag, that is beyond the policy. This council may not support flying a rainbow flag, but there may be a future council that decides in some situation that this is an important thing for the community, and during the Pride Month they would like to fly one like many other cities do. But again, it'll be the council prerogative to decide whether to do this or not with a majority vote. So I just think we ought to have the policy instead of not have the policy. It's a very common thing to do. But again, let council bring it to us because we can't decide right now about it, but we can request that they bring one to us.
I'd like them come back with those two, look at those two options, and then council can decide. But both of them are there, and we can choose.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also, I know we want to be cognizant of the Brown Act and not following, getting too in detail. So I think having a policy is really important. Absence of having one could be problematic. But so I'll just leave it at that. Are we in favor of the majority of us? Yeah. Do you have the direction that you need?
I'm hearing at least 3 council members that want to,
Formalize a policy.
coming back. One which could formalize the status quo, or an alternative which would have, give council discretion to choose other flags. And you can have that deeper discussion at that meeting then.
Okay.
That's what I understand.
Yes.
And that's all my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Haddishot, any comments?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. It's International Firefighters Day. Before we meet again, it'll be Peace Officers Memorial Day on May 15th. And I had the great joy of going to Whole Foods and the Nugget today deliver the gift cards that Wendy Garrig was talking about. And what a joy that was.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendonça?
I just want to say former Mayor Wanish was a great woman, and I wish her and her family, peace during this difficult time. I know trying to do a funeral is already challenging enough, but in the midst of COVID, I can only imagine the obstacles that they must be going through. I have some other comments, but given the hour and not to keep my colleagues here, I will say those comments at a later meeting because they can be pushed forward. But I did want to bring up one thing. I had a meeting with our city manager a day or two ago, and we usually go over what's happening and successes and things that are in progress within the city. And I thought it was interesting to note something because blight and homelessness and things have been on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and I know myself and others have been getting emails and phone calls about it from various parts of the city. So I wanted to share something that our city manager shared with me, that almost all of our homeless camps, camp collectors, for the first time in as far as back as can be remembered, we basically are at net zero of our camps in the city. And I'm just going to use Dom's wording here. This is a huge win for the city. as far as the perception when it comes to our blight issues. And the fact that we're basically at a net zero for our camps is a good thing. It's a testament to how hard our staff is working on this. It's a testament to the planning and the forward thinking that council members and staff have done to attack this challenge, in response to the concerns from our residents, because ultimately we serve you, we work for you. So I think it shows that we're taking this seriously, and it shows we're making progress on an issue that other jurisdictions and cities around us, aren't winning as well as we are. So I think it's, I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention tonight and to our viewers at home, because it really is a big deal. I mean, this is a huge problem for cities, and as we grow, it's not going to go away. And the fact that we're being so successful at getting these camps cleaned up is a good thing. So I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rakucci?
Just a couple things. And, in memory of June Wanish, actually, she was the first woman. I was the second woman, so I really looked up to her. It was kind of cute. But I remember June, some things that she brought that special to her was she was very interested in the arts in Roseville. And so if you see where the Heyman House was, that's where the Art Center was, and really interested in promoting art in Roseville. Very interested in that. She also, that was a period of time that council, my husband was on council at that time with her. He had the honor of being on council with her. Is that they did a lot of sister city activity with Mexico. For Cinco de Mayo, I can even say works out good, for Chinahuapan, Mexico. And we had a very active sister city program, and they came here, and many of us went back to Mexico. And a lot of that cultural part of the program that was happening in the city, I'm going to give June a lot of credit. And it was just a really nice time. And then I've known her all the rest of the years, and her family is just really great people. She'll be missed. She's just a really cool lady. As far as anything I've been doing, a lot of water-related, Northern California water agencies. I had a meeting today and talking to all of the board members about how they're being affected by drought. A lot of them are farmers, and when they're saying, we have the first time we don't have water for the cattle in 50 years, and really dire situations, and it also shows you just how different we all are in all different parts of California. So the drought is affecting us differently. We all notice there's no rain, and there's opportunities how even if we had a lot of water, that we always never take our resources for granted. And we'll be having a regional water association meeting tomorrow, and then there'll be a meeting of some of the directors along with Sean Bigley here from our city on conservation and looking more on water issues here on May 10th. So that'll be coming up. So it's very interesting to see how different we all are in California and how it affects us.
Thank you.
That's it.
I will also keep my comments brief tonight. I know we covered a lot of ground this evening, but I just wanted to share with my colleagues that I enjoyed the workshop that we were all able to attend last week together on our goal setting and our strategy. And it's not very often we really get a chance to talk with one another in an open dialogue setting. And I just want to thank all the staff that was able to attend that and the staff that helped put that together. I am, one of the things I nerd out on all the time is picking up trash, like when I'm out on the trails. And so I am going to host a park cleanup at Lincoln Estates Park on Sunday, May 16th at 9 a.m. I spoke with park staff and asked them to help to identify a park that could use some help, and that rose to the top. One of the community members that lives in that Roseville Greens area, once we had already mapped out that we were going to do bark in the bark box and all around and hit some of the trail areas. And I told the neighbor about it, and he said, well, how about could we get some dirt for the infield, because we can't even play softball or baseball. And so in the last day or so, actually the last few hours. Park staff said, yep, absolutely, we'll also bring in dirt. So if we won't be there for very long, I hope we have a lot of people there, but if any of you just want to come out that Sunday morning, 9 a.m., and I'll send you a reminder about that, but I'd love to have help. And then the Mayor's Cup is this Friday. It's sold out, but I will be there all day, and if you guys can come by, it'd be fun to see people. I think everyone's really anxious to get outdoors. And I know we will adjourn in June's honor, and I have a quick story that Pauline will probably remember. Last, I think it was August, right as I knew that I would be sworn in as mayor, I tried to gather all of the former mayors that I could, and there are a lot, actually, and we all met via Zoom for about an hour or so. Pauline was part of that, and Richard, and many of the names that people remember, Gina and Carol and Claudia and Susan, and June was part of that. And she was able to make the Zoom work thanks to her daughter, who she lived with and is also amazing too. And we just had a dialogue about kind of in hindsight things, and I was curious on stepping in as mayor, if each of them had a redo, what they might do differently, or what sort of advice they would have for me. And I went back through my notes today, and one few of the things that June said to me that I wrote down, and you have to remember when the time that she served as mayor and being the first female, she said she would have been more assertive, and that she would have asked more questions, and her advice was to be held accountable, to hold those around you accountable, and to listen to people, which are all things that most all of them we try to do. So I thought in her honor we would remember those words, and I will close out tonight in June's honor, and I know that we will be kept up to date once we hear about a celebration of life for her. So with that, we will adjourn this evening in memory of June Wanish, and just thank her and acknowledge the contributions that she made to our city. She loved Roseville. To the day that she passed away, she loved Roseville. So with that, we will see you all back May 19th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
You better.